Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It is now 6:30, and I will call this regular meeting of the Burnsville City Council to order. It is our tradition to stand for a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, and we invite you to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We have announcements for our upcoming meetings. We have a regular council meeting scheduled for Tuesday, September 17th and October 8th at 6:30 p.m. and a work session that's scheduled for Tuesday, September 10th at 6:30 p.m. And our budget meetings are scheduled to adopt. We are adopting the maximum tax levy tonight, September 3rd. Then we will have department budget presentations, and that will be Tuesday, October 29th, 6:30 p.m. We have a budget work session on Tuesday, November 12th, 6:30 p.m. Another budget work session on Tuesday, November 26th at 6:30 p.m. And then we adopt the budget and the final levy on Tuesday, December 3rd at 6:30 p.m. All of these meetings are open to the public, and if you wish to speak, let me know, and I'm happy to recognize you, and you may speak at any of these meetings. The next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. This is the time for anyone in the audience to address the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda or not coming before us at a future date. So is there anyone who wishes to speak to the council on an item that is not on the printed agenda and not in application form that will be coming before us at a future date? Seeing no one, the next item is for emergency items only, and this is additions to the final agenda. Ms. Johnston, do we have any emergency items to come before the body?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Members of the council, do you have any emergency items? Very good, thank you. We'll move on. The next is the consent agenda. This is a grouping of items that's considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. However, an item on the consent agenda can be removed for a separate discussion and vote. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes an item on the consent agenda to be removed for a separate discussion and vote? Ms. Johnston, does staff have anything to pull?
None from staff, Madam Mayor.
Members of the council? May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Councilmember Keeley makes the motion, second by Councilmember Sherry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. We are at the regular agenda, and the first item on the regular agenda is a public hearing. And this is a resolution to adopt the assessments for the 2013 street reconstruction improvements. And our presenting this evening is our city engineer, Mr. Ryan Peterson, and this is your show, Mr. Peterson.
All right, we'll do the best we can.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor and members of the council, for having me tonight. And like the mayor said, this is our annual street construction assessment public hearings. I'll review our process of how we got here today. I'll let you know there are 4 separate public hearings, one for street reconstruction, one for street rehabilitation, another one for our heart of the city streetscape and maintenance assessments, and then miscellaneous assessments. That'll be the last one. So for the street projects, how did we get here? In September, the council ordered a study for the work that was completed this year. We completed our survey work and preliminary plans, had a neighborhood meeting in January, took notes from the property owners. We completed our study and plans. In March, we had our first public hearing for the project, where the project was ordered. We took bids, awarded the project in April. In May, construction began in most of our areas. August, the assessment letters were mailed. Now we're right here, September. This is the second public hearing, and this is regarding assessments. After this, you have 30 days to pay this in full, or the city finances this for you over a period of years. And then September, we will be substantially complete with all of our areas. So this first one is our street reconstruction project, 13-101 A, B, and C. Area A is our 12th Avenue area, B is our Friendship area, and C is our West Preserve area. What is street reconstruction? This is where we recycle and remove the existing pavement base, basically get rid of all the gravel and the pavement that's there. We replace that with new gravel and pavement, so you get a new street. We totally replace the curbs in areas where we have water main be replaced. In areas where we don't have that extensive utility work, then we just replace the curbs that are damaged, and we also make sidewalk and American with Disability Act repairs as necessary. We also take a good look at our utility system. Our water distribution system is replaced if the pipes are made out of cast iron with ductile iron pipe, which resists breaks much more. We work the hydrants so that they have those storage nozzles so that our firefighters can hook up to them much quicker. We clean, televise, and update our sanitary sewer system by lining the inside of the pipes where necessary. We review the drainage of the roads and extend it if necessary, replace, upsize, those sorts of things. And we also review street lights, and if they're deficient, we replace them. We don't add new street lighting in with the project. So now I'll get into the areas. The 12th Avenue area, 13-101A. On this one, I'd like to note that the final lift asphalt hasn't been paved yet, but we're expecting to be later this month. What is the 12th Avenue area? It is 12th Avenue from Cliff Road up to 115th Street, 115th Street from 12th Avenue over to Rupp Drive, 116th Street from 12th Avenue over to Rupp Drive, and then Rupp Drive to its northerly cul-de-sac. Per usual, I got some before and after pictures for you. This is what it looked like before we were there, and this is after. You can see totally new pavement. We haven't done the final lift, and it looks even better once we do that. But this is another area where you can just see this in front of the MVTA bus garage where the pavement was basically shot and new, and up this is towards the north end of the project on Rupp Drive. And once again, new. Friendship area reconstruction. This one has some interesting facets to it. That this is the area that had speed humps in it prior. We allowed the residents to have some input on those. Because of that, Stephen Road submitted a petition to not have speed humps put in. Over 60% of the people signed it, so they don't want them, so we're not putting them back there. If we haven't put them in except for one on 140th Street, Friendship, and Thomas. So those are planned to go in next year after we do the final lift of bituminous. But if we haven't got one yet, I really don't anticipate having those not reinstalled. We also have a little sod work left. They would have been completed by now, but right when we wanted to finish up, we had that big heat wave go through. And then most of the final lift on Friendship Lane has been done, but all the roads to the north have not seen the final lift because we've done a lot of water main work there and want to let it sit over the winter. Friendship Lane is, or Friendship area is Friendship Lane from County Road 5 to 140th Street, including 3 cul-de-sacs. Morgan Avenue from Friendship Lane to the south. 140th Street from County Road 5 to Thomas Avenue. Thomas Avenue from 140th Street to Burnsville Parkway. Shady Lane from Thomas Avenue to its easterly cul-de-sac. 139th Street from Thomas Avenue to Stephen Road. And Stephen Road from 140th Street up to Burnsville Parkway. So once again, here's some before and after pictures. This is before. This is after. Once again, this does not have the final lift of pavement on, but it's already a great improvement. 139th Street, same thing. Here you can see we still have to put the sod in, but that'll be done very soon. Another one, 139th Street, same thing. Shady Lane, Thomas Avenue. This is one of the speed humps. We haven't put that back in yet because we haven't put the final lift of asphalt pavement on. Thomas Avenue, 140th Street before and after, 140th Street before and after, and then Friendship Lane. Now this does have the final lift, and you can see it definitely looks more complete when you do get that done, and the other ones will look just like this. And there's another one of Friendship Lane. And finally, West Preserve area reconstruction, 13-101C. We've started the final lift asphalt. There's a lot of cul-de-sacs in this area. We have 5 of those done. The rest of it we anticipate being done very soon, in the next week or two. And there's also some minor sodding work that has to be completed there, but this one's getting close to wrapped up. The West Preserve area is West Preserve, just north of 140th Street, all the way up to the northerly border into Savage. And then the cul-de-sacs of Azalea Place, Ira Circle, Moccasin Court, Thistle Lane, Sunflower Court, Heathercrest, and Ivy Terrace. And then 137.5 Street from West Preserve into Savage, and then Orchard Lane. And here's some before and after pictures, before and after. And once again, the final lift has not been done here and after. So we made some major improvements in this area, most certainly. Here you can see the road is totally cracked up in Ira Circle, and it's about done. 137.5 Street, Thistle Lane, before and after. So that gets us to the funding of the projects. The Infrastructure Trust Fund makes up the majority of the funding, which is the general taxes that go towards infrastructure preservation and replacement. Special assessments, just over $1 million. Water, sewer, and stormwater utility fund is about $1.7 million. The total project is about $4.5 million. How does that look in a pie graph or pie chart? Special assessments make up about 20% of the project. How are special assessments figured? In Burnsville, they are based upon 40% of the street costs. We set the rate yearly, and that rate is based upon the last 3 years' costs for a typical project that is similar to the one we're doing this year. It's also based upon the street size need for each parcel's land use. So that means if you own a residential parcel on Burnsville Parkway, you're only assessed for a residential street. You don't have to pay for a 4-lane road. That hasn't occurred too often in this project, but that's the situation there. And then the rate is a per foot rate, and then you multiply that by the amount of footage adjacent to the street that's being reconstructed, and that's how you get your assessment. The other 60% of the street costs are paid by the Infrastructure Trust Fund, or ad valorem taxes, and then all the utility costs are paid through those revenue funds. And then if there's anything new, like additional curb, that sort of thing, that's assessed 100%. We had a small section of that on Morgan Avenue this year. I'd like to point out that these are our 3 different classifications that we have. All these have been reduced by almost 30% this year because of the bid prices we received. So the city receives a good reduction. We also pass that on down to the residents. That's because our policy says that you're not going to pay more than 40%. So we brought our rates down so that it is at 40% of the street costs. So the rates for single-family parks, open space land uses are $21.89 a lineal foot, $30.12 for multifamily and manufactured housing land uses, and $44.21 for all other land uses per foot. And then there could be a further reduction if the street is narrower than what the land use says it should be. So we also, it never goes up, but we certainly have things that will decrease the rate. This year there were 325 parcels in our street reconstruction project. At the beginning I said we would finance these over a period of years. Those are listed below. 1 year for less than $100, between $100 and $500 for 5 years. They'd be just financed over, and $500 and over we financed over 15 years. That is with interest because it does cost the city money to finance these, so the rate is 5% interest on that. Comparable assessments, I took this back in 2011. You can see we would be on the low end of most of our neighbors. Savage, Egan's about 50%, we're 40%. Lakeville, pretty comparable with, in Bloomington, about 3,000. And Edina, I just like to throw this one in there, but they don't help cost share at all in street work. So assessments routinely get to be $10,000 and more in that community. So this year, this is lower than it was last year because of the reduction, but it's right around $2,000 for an average lot that would have 90 feet of frontage. We have not received any objections on this project to date. For it to be valid, it would need to be in writing and submitted by the end of this public hearing. Should we get any, we'd recommend the council would approve all the other ones, and perhaps any objection if it's not a matter of doing some homework on it, if it's just a matter of difference of opinion. But with that, I would stand for questions. This is a public hearing. I'd like to let the audience know that We still have the 3 other public hearings coming up, one for street rehabilitation, one for Heart of the City O&M, and then one for miscellaneous assessments, which is code violations. So don't come up now if you are here for one of those projects.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any questions for Mr. Peterson? Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Would you explain why a second lift typically waits till the following year?
Yes, I certainly can. What happens is we would do that in areas where we had extensive underground work, and so we had to dig down in the ground 8 feet to put a water main pipe in. And as much as the contractors try to compact the soils on the way up, occasionally it is we don't get the necessary compaction. That way we can repair an area that doesn't have the right compaction before we put the final lift asphalt on, so we don't have a patch in our brand new mat.
Gotcha. So it's wiser, as you later, to let it settle.
Yes.
Get driven on and let it settle, so when that final lift is put on, any repairs can be done at that time. So
Exactly. We've been doing it this way for years, and we've had good success with
it's
it.
a common question I get when people their streets are being redone and they're hitting that bump, that 1.5 inches to the curb, and wondering why that, it's such a long wait. So I think it's good to let them know that that's just a wise way of doing it and the best way to do it to ensure the long-term
Okay.
quality of the road. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Sherry.
Yes, Mr. Peterson, I just wanted to thank you for your work. I was really very impressed by the fact that it was so much, the residents were assessed 27% less than last year. I mean, that was really marvelous. But overall, I want to thank you because just the photos that you showed us just show how much better our city looks because of this kind of improvement. And we are continually trying to make our community look better and clean and fresh, and our streets are an important part of that. So thank you very much.
You bet. It can help lead to neighborhood revitalization, there's no doubt.
Yeah. And Mr. Peterson, we didn't get any notices of objection to the assessments for this. And I wanted you and Mr. Albrecht to know, and also Ms. Johnston, that I've had 3 folks tell me how wonderful their streets look.
Good.
And they thanked, I said, well, thank our staff and our contractors who put that in. So I'm passing it on.
Wonderful news.
Thank you. There is nothing else. I'm going to open the public hearing. And this public hearing is for the reconstruction project that Mr. Peterson spoke to, and that is for the 12th Avenue area, the Friendship area, and the West Preserve area. This is a public hearing for those 3 areas that were reconstructed. Is there anyone who wishes to speak to this item? Anyone who wishes to speak? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council, your pleasure. Councilmember Sherry.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve adopting the assessments for the 2013 street reconstruction improvements.
Second.
Councilmember Sherry makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you. Mr. Peterson, the next is a public hearing, and this is for the resolution adopting the assessments for the 2013 Street Rehabilitation Improvement Program.
All right.
Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. And I neglected to make one introduction to this. Our new construction coordinator here, Brian Connolly, is here tonight. He's with the black suit and purple shirt there, and he has done a great job of helping to get the word out and has increased our efforts on website notifications and has done a great job for the reason why no one came to contest it. So I would like to point out Brian is here and for his great work on the project as well.
Thank you. Yes, because we have seen Brian send us emails, but now we get to meet you, Brian. Welcome.
All right. With that, 2013 Street Rehabilitation Project, 13-102 A and B. What is A and B? The A area is Grand Avenue, Cobblestone Lane area, and the B area is 143rd Street, Burnhaven Drive. What is street rehabilitation? This is where we mill the road surface down, removed distressed pavement areas. We resurfaced with the new 2 inches of pavement, that final lift we talked about at the end of the last one. And then we replace failing concrete curb and gutter, make the American with Disability Act improvements, to make the sidewalks more accessible, and also more surface type of utility repairs, catch basins, that sort of thing, much less pipe installation on a street rehabilitation project. What is the Area A is Grand Avenue Cobblestone Lane, includes Cobblestone Lane from Nicollet Avenue to Grand Avenue, and Grand Avenue from Cobblestone Lane up to Nicollet Boulevard. And for point of reference, the post office is right here. So once again, this is the before condition on Grand Avenue, and the after, a big improvement on the street rehabilitation there. And then Cobblestone Lane before and after. And then 143rd Avenue Area B is 143rd Street from County Road 5 over to Burnhaven Drive, and Burngarten Drive from Irving Avenue up to County Road 42. This is what 143rd Street looked like before and after, and then Burngarten Drive before and after. Funding of this project, around $265,000 from the Infrastructure Trust Fund, which once again is ad valorem taxes for infrastructure preservation. Special assessments, $145,000. And then our utility funds make up about $110,000 for a total of just over $500,000. How does it look in a pie chart? Special assessments make up about 28% of this. There's less sewer and water, storm sewer dollars, so it's more of a street-intensive project. Assessments, they're very similar to the last one. They're based upon 40% of the street costs, based upon the last 3 years' similar project. Once again, based upon the street size needed for each parcel's land use. So if you had a residential parcel against a 4-lane road, they would only be assessed for the residential need of that parcel. It's implemented by the amount of footage adjacent to the street. So you set a rate per foot, multiply it by that amount of footage, and that's your rate, or that's your total. The rest of the costs are paid by the city ITF or utility funds. And once again, any new features are assessed 100%. I don't believe we had any on rehab this year. Relatively few parcels on this one. They were mostly big parcels. There was very little residential, so only 25. Once again, they can be paid off over a period of years. 1 year for 100 or less, 5 years between 100 and 500, and any assessment over 500 can be paid off over 15 years. These rates, unfortunately, we weren't able to reduce. They came in right about 40%, so these are the posted rates that we had at the beginning of the year. $11.77 per foot for single-family parks, open space land use, $14.58 for multifamily and manufactured housing land uses, and $19.38 for all other land uses. Once again, we would reduce it for streets that are less than what our policy says this land use should be, or the streets are narrower than what the land use says they should be. And then once again, if you pay it off over a period of years through the city, there is an interest rate that costs us money to borrow for funding those assessments. We haven't received we haven't received any objections on this project yet. Once again, to be valid, it would have to be written and submitted by the end of this public hearing. And if we were to receive one, I would say we would just approve all the rest. I recommend we'd approve all the rest, and then we would either take that one back or approve that one as well if it's a matter of a difference of opinion, as opposed to we need to figure out what's going on with it. With that, I would stand for questions. This is a public hearing, and once again, Heart of the City streetscaping O&M and the miscellaneous assessments are following.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any questions for Mr. Peterson? Okay, thank you. This is a public hearing, and I will now open the public hearing, and this is for the rehabilitation project, and this is for Grand and Cobblestone area and 143rd and Burngarten area. Is there anyone who wishes to address the council on these two areas of the rehabilitation project? Anyone who wishes to address the council? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council, your pleasure.
Move to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Sherry makes the motion, second by Councilmember Coughlin. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay. And the motion carries. Thank you very much. We are now at item number 7. Item number 7 is also a public hearing, and this is a resolution to adopt the 2013 Streetscape Operations and Maintenance Assessment for the heart of the city. And Mr. Peterson?
Yes, thanks once again. As you said, it's for our Heart of the City Streetscape Operations and Maintenance, and this is our annual public hearing for assessments on that. What is Streetscape Operation and Maintenance? It is the enhancements that city staff does in this area of town compared to the rest of town, and the adjacent owners in the region do help pay for those enhancements that are out there, including more effort on the boulevard turf, more effort on the median turf, including trees and shrubs and plantings. We provide irrigation systems in there, which are always a maintenance issue. We also have concrete pavers in our sidewalks, which require extra maintenance. Colored concrete sidewalks, if those have to get replaced, they are much more costly to replace than the standard gray concrete. And then there are streetlight banners that also have to get maintained. There are two different, I don't know if district is the right word or not, but two different areas that we call out. That we have the Nicollet Avenue and Burnsville Parkway area, and then there's two phases per area. Phase 1 is more intensive and also has a higher per foot rate, and then there's Phase 2, which is lesser. Phase 1 in Nicollet Avenue and Burnsville Parkway operation maintenance is Nicollet Avenue from 13 down to Burnsville Parkway. Phase 2 is from Aldrich Avenue on Burnsville Parkway to Nicollet Avenue, and then Nicollet Avenue from Burnsville Parkway down to 143rd Street. And then the second area is the Heart of the City operation and maintenance area. Once again, there's two phases here. One has more intense and more needs, and the other that has more cost then. So the Phase 1 is East Travelers Trail from Eagle Ridge Drive to Nicollet Avenue, First Avenue from Cub Foods down to Eagle Ridge Drive, 125th Street from First Avenue to Nicollet Avenue, 126th Street from Nicollet Avenue down to Pillsbury. Pillsbury right behind the Performing Arts Center, and Burnsville Parkway from Nicollet Avenue to just east of 125th Street. And then Phase 2, with the lesser, is East Travelers Trail from Eagle Ridge Drive to the east, First Avenue from East Travelers Trail down to south of 125th Street, and 125th Street from First Avenue to Burnsville Parkway. So those are the areas. I talked about having Phase 1 and Phase 2, the higher costs or lower costs given if there's more effort or not. The Heart of the City area, Phase 1 is $866 per lineal foot. Phase 2, $413 per lineal foot. Nicollet Avenue, Burnsville Parkway, O&M, Phase 1 is $766 per foot, and the Phase 2 there is $366 per foot. The total assessed for this year's streetscape O&M is just shy of $112,000. These costs are based upon actual costs that we calculate to provide these enhancements. And once we get it, we divvy it out amongst the lineal footage that we have. And one thing I'd like to point out, there's a lot of multiple owner parcels there. So and they're spread equally amongst all the ownership. So if you had $1,000 and you had 10 condos, each one would be $100. Now I got to do my math. I challenged myself there, but so that's how those work. Once again, we haven't received a objection. For it to be valid, it would have to be written and submitted by the end of this public hearing. And if we have that situation, we can discuss whether we'd approve all the rest of them and bring that one back or not. But Terry Schultz, the director of this program, is here if we get into any sort of questions on a specific item. With that, I'd stand for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any questions? Councilmember Sherry.
No, but again, I'd just like to make the comment of how lovely this area is. And I know that the residents and the businesses pay extra to have it maintained at a higher level. Nonetheless, I get a lot of compliments, and I'm sure other council members do too, about the attractiveness of this area. And it enhances the whole city as we try to make it look more attractive. So thank you very much.
Agreed. And Terry and his
Thank you,
crew
Terry.
certainly would be responsible for that.
Councilmember Coughlin.
I'd just like to make a point to our citizens that for this part of the hearing and our road improvement for this year and assessments, we've had no objections and no citizens' comments. So believe me, if the citizens weren't happy, we would have heard from them on that. So thank you, and obviously the citizens believe it's a fair and reasonable assessment, and thank you on their behalf as well.
It always has been. This area has never had an objection, and I was happy to pay mine. I already gave them a check. Always pay the check when we have the assessment hearings,
They do
because it is well done to our staff. It's well kept, and you can see the families who enjoy Nicollet Commons Park and a lot of activity, so thank
Larry and
you.
his crew do a great job.
Yes. Okay, I will now open the public hearing, and this is for the heart of the city, special assessment for operations and maintenance. Does anyone have, if you have,
I just have a comment.
please,
You just said how no one has objected to the area.
please
and
give us your name and address for the record.
Christine Coe, 1221 Early Shores Lane, Burnsville. You just said how no one has objected to the heart of the city, and the
Excuse me, you can
tons
talk.
of money being thrown away because you wanted it. There was no vote, and I just had to die when you made that comment. Because of that, there's been a trickle effect of so much repercussions that the city has suffered because of that bleeding monstrosity, that it's a great view where you live, but it's ridiculous.
Councilmember
I
Coughlin?
just want to state what I said. In this regard, for assessments of the people that live there that are assessed, we've had
But the
no
whole
objection.
city has suffered from that project.
You're entitled to that. I assume you're commenting on what I said, and so I'm just telling
I'm
you.
commenting on what she said, how it's a great area, no one's objected to it, and she's glad to pay her
To
share.
any of the operational and maintenance cost that the people pay who live there and who have businesses there.
But as far as I know, the whole city has paid for your project, your Performing Arts Center.
Okay. Ms.
And
Cole, we may have a disagreement on, because that area of the city was yielding $246,000 in taxes, and it was becoming quite blighted. It now makes over $1 million because of all of the property who pay the taxes in that area. So if people didn't like it, they would not have agreed to build their buildings or their businesses in that area.
was there a vote for that building?
Oh, absolutely, there was a vote. Everything we do has a vote.
I guess we.
Everything, and it goes all the way back to 2000. Everything we do is very protracted because it is very transparent. And the vote for all of those things took place. The first building went up in 2004.
And hasn't
and-
lost money since? Isn't it losing money every year? I guess.
I don't know who's losing the money because those people pay the taxes and it's their
The Performing
project.
Arts Center, is it making money?
Okay, now you're talking about something.
No, I just said, is it making money, or is it costing
It has never been
taxpayers?
part of the business plan, just like the Ice Center or any of the parks, that it's supposed to make money. Our goal is to have it break even. And it is a new business, and it opened in the worst recession we had ever experienced, and it has achieved its goals that we had set on every one of those years.
So
So
it's
when you
losing
talk
money. It's not
about,
making money then.
it has never been something that it would make money.
Has it broke even?
It's 5 years old and it hasn't. But it has continued to reduce the subsidy that the city puts into it. And we also know how we were going to pay for it because we had a good business plan in place. But this is not the time for that,
No, I
Ms.
just-
Cole, so
because
thank
of-
you for
because of
coming
the-
up.
Because the effects of that, we get letters, it seems like all the time, about you guys need more money for this, you need more money for that.
I don't know if you've gotten any letters from the city about money for
I'm
anything.
here.
Well, then that's good. And this is about the maintenance,
Okay, I
the
was just-
public hearing.
No, I was just trying to get an understanding of how everybody.
Well, we appreciate that. Thank you. Anyone who wishes to speak about the heart of the city operations and maintenance? Seeing no one, I will close the public hearing. Members of the council, your pleasure.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adopt the 2013 streetscape operation and maintenance assessments for 2013.
Councilmember Sherry makes the motion.
A second.
Second by Councilmember Nguyen. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you. The next item is also a public hearing, and this is the resolution to adopt the 2013 various miscellaneous assessments. And this has to do with all of the code violations and other miscellaneous violations within the city. Mr. Peterson?
Thank you once again. As you said, this is our miscellaneous assessments public hearing. This is for two general things. One is for assessment agreements that we've had with different property owners, such as if a private owner or developer wants to have a public improvement put in, we can come to an agreement on that, and then we complete the agreement, and then we got to finalize the costs and send that down to for finalization. And that basically is one side of it. And the other side is the code and operation issues with private property owners. This includes the costs for those are generally city staff, our time for inspections. It could be legal enforcement costs if necessary, and then if we have to hire a contractor for weeds or some sort of abatement. So what are the costs that we have this year? We have $231,821.16. This is primarily for Buck Hill. Buck Hill petitioned the city to enhance its snowmaking ability, or at least provide water so that they could enhance their snowmaking ability. So that makes up a vast majority of the miscellaneous assessments for the year. The other items are delinquent invoices, and this gets into the code violations that we talked about, where we have received some objections to the assessments. Those are $9,520. This is primarily if we have to go out 2 or 3 different times and we haven't seen anything or been contacted. So you certainly do not get charged for an initial visit or anything like that. This is if we aren't notified several times and then we have to go out. Hazardous waste cleanup, the $28,000. This is primarily, I don't know if hoarders are the right word to use, but we have had an issue where we needed to step in because it was a public health issue where we had to go and clean out a place because there were neighbors on the other side, and it was to the public's interest from a health perspective to clean that up. Weeds, if we have to go and remove weeds from a site after we've told them to do so, or a private property owner to do so. And then false alarms is if we continually have to go to the same site over and again because alarms keep being set off or we continually getting called. So the total is around $275,000 for this. Once again, I'd like to point out a vast majority of that is for Buck Hill on something they petitioned for us to do. When I had completed this, we had 4 objections. I think we're up to 6 or 7 at this point. I don't know, if, Michelle, if you have a final total there, but maybe it's not important. But we have received 6 or 7 objections, primarily on code violations. So with this, you're likely to have some folks come up here. And what we can do is either continue the hearing for objections that we receive, or if we think we need to do more homework, or it could be a matter of a difference of opinion, in which case we could still approve the assessments and have to go through it. So that'll be up to the decision. Joel may be able to provide some guidance on which ones we maybe should do what with out there. But with that, also we have our head of the Protective Inspections Department here, Chris Forsland, who will be able to answer specific questions for you. And with that, I'd stand for any questions. And once again, this is the public hearing, and this is the last one for this.
Let's see. I have Councilmember Keeley,
I thought you were going to say somebody else after that.
who wishes to speak.
Thank you. That's your going on. With regard to the false alarms, I believe that's a policy that's been in place for quite some time. Have we collected fines for excessive false alarms prior to this?
Yeah.
Excuse me, we can't hear out here very well.
Can the
Control room, can you crank up the volume of the speakers in the audience? That's the first time I've ever heard that my voice couldn't be heard, by the way. I'm a very projected speaker.
So I kind of let it fly. It's really
2 weeks ago we had the same problem.
Yeah. Did we
Okay,
crank up the watts?
Yeah.
Okay, can you hear
Is
us?
that better?
Can you hear me now? If I
able to hear the mayor, but the rest of you have been very faint, so maybe
Yeah. Can you pull your...
a little.
Oh, they say.
Why would yours be turned up louder than ours?
No, because I
Is that coming
because
from
I
the
can
office?
no because I project a little bit more than you do, and I also have
then-
mine straight out.
I know.
Does that help? Can you
Does
hear?
that help?
Can you hear now?
I believe so. The gentleman would like to pull it a little closer to him. I'm sure we could hear him better.
Wow, this is very rare. People are
Yeah.
usually saying, I can only hear you, but I can't hear everybody else.
Thank you.
And I was just joking, of course. I know that we don't get this comment very often, but at our last meeting, actually, we did hear from the audience saying that it was
couldn't hear.
very difficult to hear out there. So we may have some new folks volunteering in our control room. So anyway, I just wanted to know if there was a collection of false alarms, because it isn't something that necessarily comes before us in this form as we are doing now. And so I want everyone to understand that that's not a new thing, that we have had false alarms in the past and have assessed fines.
Keeley, it does come. All the miscellaneous comes before us every year.
In a very condensed, without all this other stuff. This is presented in a slightly different form
in a
than this
bit
time.
different.
And that's what, so it gets, so it's a little more highlighted this time, actually. I mean, because it's mixed with some other things that are relatively new. That's what I was getting at. So is this false alarm fine dollar amount fairly consistent with what we have potentially assessed in recent periods for whatever period this is?
Unfortunately, this is not my area of expertise, but maybe Joel will be able to.
Mayor and Council, yes. Our assessment agreements this amount is higher because of the Buck Hill.
Yeah, Buck Hill deal. Right.
But you're right, we broke them out in a little bit more detail because we had that wide range of numbers. So that's why you saw the $250,000 for Buck Hill, separate from the fire alarm, separate from the weed, and separate from the code enforcement issue, so you'd have a sense of where those miscellaneous ones are. You usually do get them combined in a package. They're broken out a little bit more this year so you can see the differences. But we have not had a spike in false alarms or a noticeable reduction.
Okay. Thank you. And just to clarify for everyone watching that may have gotten one of these, what is our policy on how many do you get in a grace period before you get an invoice?
I am not certain. I see the police chief out there. I don't know if you have information on that or not.
Typically, it's 3 false alarms.
Chief, can
All right, Chief, can you come on up
you
and
come
take
to
a
the
mic?
podium, please?
Thank you.
So if you could restate the question, Councilmember Keeley?
How many false alarms, and I would assume that that's home or business security alarms that are going off and notifying police or fire of the alarm, does a business or a resident get before they are assessed a fine?
Typically, it's been our practice, they get three warnings, false alarms, it's be the 4th when we start to bill them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a good
That's pretty good. I know some cities are less lenient than that. You
Yep.
get one gimme, and then they start hitting you with fines.
Typically,
So I
after
think
the
that's very
3rd
fair.
one, we'll bill you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Chief. This is Chief Giesecke. Oh. Okay. Councilmember Wynn.
Yes, Mr. Peterson, I just had a question. Can you clarify for the residents and for us again, the length of time after a resident would receive a violation notice or a code violation notice? How long do they have before a second notice would be issued, and the length of time before they're actually fined, that type of thing?
I see a lot
I
of
think
people
I'm going to
pointing
go
over
to
there.
Mr. Forsland, who
Okay.
heads up that division. Mr. Forsland.
Yeah, Madam Mayor and council members, we're looking at about 10-day period between.
So the first notice
First notice and
is
second
just
notice.
a warning, and they have 10 days to respond or to
Correct.
Cure.
cure the issue. And if a resident calls and says, I need more than 10 days to solve whatever problem it is that something that we work on with our residents to?
Absolutely. We try to do that whenever possible, and the whole point is that we have that direct contact. It's very helpful.
Okay. And then by the second time, if you haven't heard from them, you have to go out a second time. Is that when they're actually fined?
Correct, because there will be a third inspection then that triggers that.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Councilmember Coughlin.
I'd like to direct this towards our city attorney, Joel. Joel, could you just give a little history on the assessment for weeds and code violations, how that's come to pass recently, and how that's changed from before or from the past?
Mayor
for our
and council
citizens?
members, Councilmember Coughlin is alluding to the fact that the city changed the policy recently with regard to our property maintenance inspections. The weed inspection aspect of tonight's hearing is about the same as previous years, where we provided notice, and if we had to abate or cut the lawns or the weeds or remove the vegetation, there was a charge. And so that's pretty much the same as far as the cost of removal or abatement. But after many months of research and consideration, the council adopted a new system on the property abatement, property maintenance issues, in which case that we would not have the general fund pay for follow-up inspections, as has already been discussed tonight, that the initial inspection in response to either a citizen complaint regarding the property or a staff-initiated enforcement action, the first site visit, if you will, to confirm that or view the violation, there is no charge. And the first follow-up inspection to see whether or not it's been remedied or cleaned up has no charge. But second, third, and succeeding inspections are charged under the new fee ordinance that the council passed for costs of staff. And then additionally, on the fourth violation, if we still don't have response, we will issue citations. That will necessitate a court appearance, possible fines, possible warrants, and jail time if the matter is not resolved. So it is a new system that the city has adopted to put a little bit more enforcement aspect so that the general fund and the taxpayers of the city don't pay the cost for third, fourth, or fifth inspections and the inordinate staff time in order to get compliance. It's not motivated as punishment, but rather as an incentive and a cost recovery to offset those staff times, our office, city staff, and any contractors we have retained to help do inspections.
Councilmember Coughlin.
And continuing along those lines, would it be fair to say that over 2 years you observed that we had a number of citizens show up as citizens' complaints or citizens' comments and give significant grief to the council sitting up here about that the council wasn't doing enough in addressing these types of issues, and that was a regular complaint?
As part of the study information, Councilmember Coughlin, that is correct. Part of the motivation of the council was the large number of complaints that we were getting from property owners regarding the appearance of the community throughout the community, and it was part of a council staff initiative to increase the enforcement measures, provide additional staff, a schedule of inspections, aggressive enforcement, and review of those violations to get them cleaned up. The purpose is not punitive, but rather to clean up and address those issues in a timely fashion.
Okay, Councilmember Coughlin.
And wouldn't it be fair to say that those same citizens actually accuse the council of not doing its job for not taking action on a regular basis?
Frequently, and that is one of the issues we face when we have to take individuals to court. The judicial system takes some time to go through. Judges routinely give people 2 or 3 months in addition to what staff has already provided as a means to remedy the situation, and consequently the neighbors and the community at large question, how come it's taking so long to clean up a relatively simple matter? But the problem is many times we can't access the property, or the property owners themselves resist mowing the lawn, removing the offending items, or otherwise addressing the violations in a timely fashion. And the court process as far as scheduling for hearings, working through the process, and then giving time for compliance can oftentimes stretch things out to a year or more. And that was also one of the motivations for the council in trying to put additional incentives and fees in front of the actual court appearance so that we would achieve higher rates of compliance.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. And one of the things that probably for our residents to also understand that the code violations, or when our staff is out visiting these properties, they're usually generated by a complaint by someone, and then they call City Hall and complain about a property or a violation that they have witnessed. And that's how all of this gets generated. And that gets to your point, Councilmember Coughlin, where we've had citizens come before us to complain that we're not doing enough, we're not doing our job to keep the city looking good and the neighborhoods well maintained. So that's where all of that is coming from. All right, this is a public hearing. If there isn't any other questions for staff, Councilmember Keeley, did you have a question for staff?
No, I just want, if I may, follow up on Bill's line of questioning
Okay.
from one council to another. It was very interesting, but it really did set the stage, and the questions were excellent because it brought back
The reason
even for
why.
my benefit is why we're here. And to those folks who are here because there was an assessment and a fine related to, from our inspections department, it's very true that we dealt with a steady stream of people complaining about why the city wasn't doing their job as council members, fixing a problem in their neighborhood, their next door neighbor, a property nearby, over and over and over again. And as our city attorney cited, we felt helpless because months and months would go by. These same people would come back to us and complain, why can't you do anything about this person's 2-foot tall weeds, or siding that's falling off, or driveway that's got giant crevices through it, or whatever it might be. And we were really helpless. So we finally took the bull by the horns, put this process in place, and it's a big change, but it's meant to fix those problems. But that doesn't mean that those of you who are here tonight, because you assessed something, are going to agree with it and feel it's fair. But now you at least understand why, that we really did it with the right intent. It wasn't necessarily set up as what you might look at as they just fined me $110 for something that I didn't reply to the inspections department fast enough on. It's not there for that. It's there to make sure that these things are taken care of and that we have the processes in place to be able to get them done. Otherwise, we would continue to get residents complaining over and over again about why we aren't doing anything about this person's property that is way out of code violation. And so this is a new process. This is the first public hearing under this new ordinance that we put in place, and it's going to be a bit of a period of adjustment for everybody. But now you at least have a good understanding of why we're here and why this is in place. And we're willing to listen to everyone's story and certainly be as fair and equitable to everybody as possible. But there is really a purpose for it's here, and there's a reason why there's a situation in front of us, a fairly long list, and really there's not that many people out here compared to how many we have. So thank you for coming out, and when your time is allowed to speak, we're here to listen. You elected us to do a job. Part of our job is to make sure the city is clean, the city is safe, the city looks good, and the people that own the property follow the rules, because that benefits everybody. So thank you.
Councilmember Coughlin.
Just one last question to our city attorney, Joel. As I understand it, this is an appeal process, but it's still that we sit as de novo as the appeal?
Mayor and council members, not quite de novo in the sense that you are reviewing the record, the fact whether or not notification had been provided, whether our ordinance had been complied with, and whether the staff has. So in some respects, you're the first reviewer of it, so it is de novo in that regard. But you are reviewing the record that has been prepared already and the complaints or the appeals that have been filed.
So what, further question then what is the standard of review?
Did we comply?
Best
I wouldn't go with the arbitrary and capricious standard or limited review, but it is de novo in the sense that you are fully empowered to modify the proposed assessments. But having said that, one of the reasons we provided the information we did is so that you could see the complete assessment roll, the number of appeals that you have. And one of the things I would urge the council to consider is whether or not, if there's an error in the process, something factually where someone did not receive notice of the violation, did not have an opportunity to cure within the time, compared to situations where they were treated exactly the same as any other property owner that received the notice, who's not appealing this evening. So that is one of the bases for it. I will say from my initial review, I would not recommend on any of these this evening so far deferring the adoption of the resolution and having a subsequent hearing. Unlike our other assessment, where we might discuss appraisal information or data, that, as Mr. Peterson indicated, would change our review of whether or not the property received market or special benefit. Here, I think our review is more limited to whether or not the procedures that the council adopted were followed, whether there was ample time for compliance, whether the property owners knew that there was a sanction that was, or a penalty or a charge that would be imposed, and what is and the status that we have before us this evening. And so far tonight, reviewing the appeals that I've seen, I would not be recommending that we defer adoption of the resolutions at this point.
So it is reviewing whether our staff complied with the process and the procedure that we had set forth in the ordinance that we adopted. Okay. Anything else? Any other questions? Not. This is a public hearing. I will open the public hearing for the code violations. Please make your way to the podium, and we'll just, if you'll line up at along the wall, and then we'll take you one at a time. And so if you'll come up, please give us your name and address for the record, and then speak to the issue.
Mayor,
Yes.
can I just interject also that in addition to the presentations, in order to perfect their appeal rights, we must receive the appeals in writing. So if people have not already provided an appeal in writing, if you plan to appeal it beyond tonight, you have to provide a written objection in addition to your verbal comments at the hearing.
Okay. Everyone understands that if you're going to object, other than your comments tonight, we'll accept your verbal comments, but if you're going to appeal, then your objection, it needs to be in writing, and it needs to be handed to the clerk. And Ms. Brooks is our clerk. So, please, and welcome.
Thank you. And I'll ask, am I projecting? Mm-hmm. Everybody can hear me? Okay, good. My name is Lori Lukonic, and I did provide a letter that I believe I made enough copies for every member up here today. Ms. Brooks, have you distributed those?
We have your objection.
Okay, thank you very much. I live at 11319 West River Hills Drive. I've been a member of this community for a little over 15 years, and I received a letter, and attached to what I gave you is a copy of the code violation, evidently, letter I received. That was quite confusing to me because it talks about a project that would be $9,520. Of course, at tonight's meeting, I saw an overhead that said that's a cumulative, but when I received this letter, I had no idea. So there I am, and I'm sure you don't want to hear a sob story, but I've been dealing with a sick mother. I've been gone a lot. I get home. I've got a lot of things that maybe aren't going as well in my life as I'd like them to. Getting a letter about a $9,520 assessment for a project, my address identified on that letter was similar to a stake through my heart at that moment. I called and left a message with the city right away, and I did. Whoever it was who called me back Monday morning was dutiful in doing that right away, and I thanked them because at least I didn't have to sweat it out for another week. And the person who I spoke to, and I'm going to guess it's one of you here, just curious, are you here? I called and I said, boy, this is a letter I don't understand. That person said, you know, it doesn't very well explain the situation, does it? And I said, no, it doesn't. What is the $9,000 program at my address? I went to 4 of my neighbors and asked them to please look at that letter. They were shocked. They offered to come to the council meeting with me. None of them could make sense out of it, and I consider them relatively intelligent people. So I guess I'm speaking to you, and I heard you talk about why this takes place and everything. I'm not unfamiliar with city operations. I'm a project manager myself. You know, I know that to get things done, you have to have a process. But I'm speaking to you to say, please use this as an opportunity to listen to not just one, but several, and the people that don't come forward, because guess what? A lot of them don't. But they sit and they talk behind your back. They say things like, I've heard references to Germany during World War II. I'm offended by that for a number of reasons. Number one, this is the city I chose to live in. So I think if something isn't working right, I appeal to you and to your nature to listen to me, give me a moment to just understand. It's sometimes the little things that push people over. My certain situation was silly. It was a car with a license tab that had expired in my driveway. And it was a car I was donating. I was waiting for somebody to get it. We had a lot of snow, we had a lot of ice, we had a lot of things going on. And by the time I came home, my mother is at the U of M for several months. By the time I came home and found a letter, the first notice I saw said it was a second notice. That was the first I saw. I thought it was interesting, the exchange that Bill and Dan requested for how this works, but when I called, whoever I spoke to the other day said, yeah, we've got record that you did call and say that was your first notice. And I said, well, do you also have record that I called you to let you know I donated my car to ALS Society? They're picking it up. They were waiting for, some clearance so that they could get in there. Yes, we have notice of that. And I said also that I asked, does that back off my, code violation? Well, when I had asked that, when I called back, nobody could answer that question for me. And nobody said, I'd be happy to call you back after I researched that. As a project manager, I would insist that the people that looked, out for other people and the people that worked for me would have a clear idea of how to construct a letter like this, how to communicate to somebody who's going in and has a concern. And so I'm really disappointed. Again, I think this is an opportunity, folks. And it might not be a lot to you, but 110 is a lot to me right now. I'm unemployed. I'm managing my mother's affairs and mine.
Okay.
And I'm running thin.
Okay.
And I do feel that you have in your notes that I have called numerous times to say, hey, what do we do about this?
Okay. Thank you for bringing it to our attention. And did you understand what the 9,000 is? Because
I do now after calling and speaking to somebody. But if you look at that letter,
yes,
I don't think there's a single one of you
yeah.
who would not understand that that was very misleading.
Okay. Mr. Jamnick, our attorney, is going. But I understand on the process piece with regard to the 110 for the vehicle.
Correct.
That's the piece, and that you've had some communication with our staff.
I had communication prior to this, and when I called them, they said, oh, yeah, we've got all of this written down. I said, then why do I still have this? I don't know. You'll have to make an appeal. Okay. And I think that's weak. I'm not impressed. And I tell people I'm proud to live in Burnsville. I tell them a lot of good things about Burnsville. But I'll tell you what, that's arrogant.
Okay.
That's arrogant.
Thank you, Ms. Lukonic. Mr. Jamnick.
Mayor and Council, most of the references to the assessment notification, which under state statute we have to put certain information in there, and the project amount is the total amount of the code of violations or assessment charges. It is pretty clear that the code violation for the proposed assessment against her property for the code violations is $110.
So that's clear.
So that part's clear in the right. It's not the 9,000.
May I disagree with you? I'm holding a copy of that letter, and it very seriously, it says, proposed assessment against your property, specific improvement, nothing, blank, amount under that 110. It's code violation. It doesn't tell me what it was. It doesn't tell me anything. At the very beginning,
In bold,
the area to be assessed is 11319 River Hills Drive West. The total amount of the project is $9,520. I'm not an unbright woman.
Keep going.
I can keep going all day long.
No, please keep going.
Surely, your assessment has been calculated in accordance with the City Council's policy as follows.
Keep going.
And, yeah, I've read it. I'm just telling you. I showed it to
says
4
proposed
other
assessment
neighbors.
against your property, specific improvement, code violations, amount $110, in bold.
And how come I showed it to 4 other residents of the community? who I consider very intelligent people, and none of them could figure it out. They walked over to my yard and they were going, well, do you think that there's, something, that's going to be done with the street? Do you think it's your fence? Do you think it's a tree too close to the road? I'm serious, folks.
Okay. Councilmember Sherry.
It seems to me that, and I understand that this is definitely clear legal language, but it seems to me maybe another sentence or two could be in this for the future to just help explain it to those who, because I had to really look closely at it too. But what I'm most interested in is the response to Ms. Lucanic from staff. Does staff have anything that they would like to add about her calls, and was anybody taking notes, or what was the conclusion from staff?
I was going to also ask that too.
Yeah.
Ms. Faulkner or Mr. Forsland, who's taking this one?
I would just say, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we just received this evening, so we don't have any of the specific information with us. So if you are so inclined and want additional information, we would suggest that this one be continued so we can get you that information.
Councilmember Keeley, I think if we're going to need more information from staff, I think it would be something that we would defer to the next council meeting, if you so. Councilmember Keeley.
I would agree, and I want to comment on the form itself. It is clear that there's a fine for 110. That 9,500 was completely misleading to me as well. Mr. Jamnik, is that required by state statute that has to be spelled out on there?
For the total assessment project cost, that's correct.
Yeah, because it's total assessment project cost. I agree with Ms. Lucanic. If I were receiving this, I'd be totally confused by that 9,500. I thought she had a home improvement project
That's what I
where
thought.
there was a code violation where the 110 was triggered, like a bad vent or a switch or electrical or plumbing or something. I had no clue that had something to do with
And
the
we will
bigger
get
picture.
same with the street rehab and the street reconstruction numbers.
Yeah.
Those assessment notices also have that project cost on there, and when you have the $5 million one, it gets people's attention, say on the recon.
Yeah, and it says street recon. This is different. I think we need to work on this form, somehow improve this to make these types more clear. Because I sat there just as confused as you were. I knew your fine was 110, but I had no idea what this 9,500 was
I
related
was concerned that's where we were starting, and Lord knows where we were going.
No, I just assumed that you had a project that was an improvement project, because it says improvement. So, oh, it's got a home improvement. Maybe there's a plumbing violation or something. But
Members of the council,
no,
if we
I would move to
because
defer this.
I have Councilmember Coughlin first, had his hand up, but then I'll come back to Councilmember Sherry. Councilmember Coughlin.
So just to sort of clarify, Ms. Laconic, really you're part of, it's not intended as part of your defense that you were sort of offended by the letter. You're just bringing that to our attention as part of goodwill to the council. I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, because if that's not correct, then you'll tell me. And that your real defense, in fact, is, as far as you're concerned, is you did not get proper notice. And this will be interesting, because in law, usually, if in fact the sender of the mailed article attests that they sent it, the presumption then shifts to the person, the receiver. I don't know how that will work here. That'll be something to look. But that's your real defense. Your real defense then is, I didn't receive proper notice. And in fact, when I received second notice, I believe that's first notice. Therefore, then I contacted the city and tried to take care of it in a reasonable time. So I just want to clarify that that's your defense, and the comment about the letter is just enlightening the council to do a better job when they send out notice violations. Is that correct?
Exactly. It's an opportunity.
Yep.
It is an
And
opportunity, and thank you.
The person
and we'll
who-
do that.
The person who I spoke to, whoever answered the phone, and I'm thinking it may be one of you, and it was somebody who actually called me back in response to a message I left over the weekend after I got the letter. And they very clearly looked up the records and said, yes, I can see you called. I can see you said you didn't receive that. I can see you asked that there would be no fee. And that was months ago, and this was the first time I heard about it from something that took place in March, and thought it was a done deal. And I just want to say that, my letter at the very end, the last paragraph, it makes it very clear that I am here for 2 reasons. 1, to remove a 110 fine that I'm unable to pay without hardship. I've been unemployed for over a year. 2, to appeal to the City Council to consider how negatively property owners are feeling about a department that implements the issue of similar code violations. I have been a resident of Burnsville for over 15 years. I moved here from Egan. I've been proud of the beautiful city, the new PAC, the heart of the city, the parks, etc. I have expressed pride in my community and feel I represent it well. I do, however, suspect that there is a selective process for identifying properties that have violated ordinances, that do little to build a community and far too much to tear it down.
Thank you.
So
Councilmember Coughlin, and I think Councilmember Sherry, did you remove yourself from the
So
queue?
for each one of you, again, as long as I have to sit here as a council member, determiner of facts. So your argument just is not that you just didn't. It's not a procedural argument. In addition to that, your argument is. Second argument then is hardship. Even if somehow it was properly done, then I can't afford it because I don't have a job. And that your third argument is, well, I'm just repeating. I'm trying to clarify what so I understand, truly understand what, and that your third argument is that you don't, as a citizen, you don't like that somehow you feel that somebody in the city has picked on you specifically. You're part of this group. Well, again, I'm not putting words in your mouth. I listened to what you said. I'm just trying to understand it so I can make a good decision about what your argument is.
I would be more prepared to deliver a precise, clear argument to you if I were meeting you in court, not at a city council meeting. So I do apologize if my letter brings up more information than you would care to dissect at this time. My interest is not in butting heads or calling people arrogant or anything like that. My interest is in saying, I think this is a poor process. I think it could be cleaned up quite a bit. And no, I don't think the assessment code violation should be directed at me because there are records at the city that somebody can assess and prove what I am saying. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Laconic, for coming and speaking to us. Members of the council, I would ask that we defer this item and ask staff to bring back more information for the next council meeting for us to review the process and the procedure that took place with Ms. Laconic, because she walked away assuming in March that it was handled and that the automobile was already given to the ALS nonprofit, and she attests that our staff did not respond. So let's defer it to the next council meeting.
Given what we know, I would agree.
Yes. Councilmember Sherry.
Madam Mayor, and maybe I should ask staff, would staff have records of such conversations?
Madam Mayor, Council, we do maintain records,
Okay.
and we can
right.
certainly take a look at it.
So we would be able to determine whether or not this actually happened.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Then I support it.
Okay, may I have a motion to defer?
Mayor,
Yes.
might I suggest you just hold that, and then when you adopt the resolution, indicate which ones you are deferring?
Okay, so instead of taking them one at a time.
Just wait until you hear all of them.
So I'm going to ask the clerk to please, so this is parcel number 02-64131-02-050. Okay, that we're, okay. Next, please.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and
Good evening.
members of the council. I'm Scott Lundquist. I have worked or lived in Burnsville since 1973. Longtime resident and currently reside at 905 Kmart Lane. I too echo Ms. Laconic's objection to how the letter was worded. I was confused. I thought it was $9,520 until I talked to somebody at staff. My assessment is $380 plus a criminal violation that the city's also pursuing against myself and my wife, threatening us to put us in jail for 180 days, both of us. This pertains to code violations that took place between the middle of March and the first week in May. And I set forth and it relates to parcel 0254500041110. I did provide the city with a written objection, and I stated the four grounds, and the amount of $380 I feel is excessive, considering there was no service provided by the city with respect to the parcel. And when you review the city code, assessments require a service, and there is no provision in the code to make assessments based upon fines, such as has been pointed out by several council members on this panel, indicating that this, in fact, is truly a fine. Number two, reasonable time was not given to us to remedy the violations, considering the cold weather conditions. We had several major snowstorms during this March and April time period. Most of the time, whatever the city was complaining about in terms of the notices to us was covered up. We didn't notice it. We had no idea that these things were in violation. And when I did the research, I in fact found out that they were not in violation. For example, we had a covered yard waste bin that was outside. Generally, this has been picked up by Waste Management every year. Apparently this year or sometime last year they decided not to pick them up, so I put it alongside my house. And that's a violation that result in most of the fines here. And the other one was exterior storage. And the exterior storage was a ladder and other things, as it was told to us. I had a ladder that was given to me by my mother, who also was a Burnsville resident, about a year ago. And when she gave it to me, it was a 22-foot extension ladder that there was no place in the garage to put it. Put it alongside the garage, and it was very visible. In fact, it is not visible from the road unless you have a telephoto lens. I've taken pictures from the road and can verify to the council that you couldn't see this ladder unless you either walked up to it or had a telephoto lens or binoculars. The last person who used the ladder, it was somebody in the cul-de-sac that we reside in, and he put it back alongside the house. The two ordinances which were cited as violating, one says, it's a property maintenance code, and it's, in Chapter 4, Title 4, Chapter 8, and it just talks about that if screening is allowed in your zoning section, that it has to be opaque for where the exterior garbage cans are. The applicable ordinance, really, members of the council, and this is something that you have to make clear, because people, citizens of Burnsville, are entitled to fair notice of what a violation is and what a violation isn't. But the applicable code is in Title 10, Chapter 12, applying to single residences. And the applicable code says that the covered, put it this way, it says that garbage needs to be screened or kept in covered waste containers. That's what the applicable code says for single-family homes. It doesn't say anything about screening the covered waste containers. It says, or placed in a covered waste container. And that's the code section that would apply to my house, because we are in a single-family residence zoning section. The property maintenance code, in fact, refers to the zoning section. And so you've got a contradiction if you're going to construe the property maintenance code one way and your zoning code says something, quite something else. The other provision, other ordinance which they have cited my wife and I as violating was a general provision in the zoning code, which is found in, I believe, Title 10, where Chapter 7, general provision that says no exterior storage allowed any place in the city of Burnsville. That's what it says. And of course, if you're going to apply that literally, you would inoculate Burnsville from things that many homeowners typically do. And that is keep their garbage cans outside alongside their house, keep other things, hoses, they keep portable basketball hoops, goalie nets, soccer nets. They store these things out, toys. They store these things outside. And obviously, we're entitled to use our property to the extent of not interfering with the city code, but that the city is not entitled to read a provision that is meant broadly to apply to industrial zones. That's what that provision is supposed to apply to, industrial zones, because it refers to exterior storage, and you've defined exterior storage and referred to exterior storage in the industrial part of your zoning ordinance. And you can't use that broad prohibition of not being able to store anything outside and then leave it to the discretion of a code enforcement officer to decide what things he's going to allow and what things he's not. That's arbitrary. That provides too much discretion, and it's arbitrary and capricious. So if you're going to have exterior storage from being prohibited, you better be specific. It better refer specifically to a vehicle, which you do have. Or it better refer to, like you have in multifamily dwellings, you have no exterior storage of trash containers in that part of your code. But you don't have that for single-family residences. So the point is, you have a code that provides the code enforcement officer too much discretion. The fourth basis of our objection is that you don't provide procedural due process. If you're going to do a fine for people who violate city code, and you're going to eventually assess property, you have to have a procedural due process mechanism in place. Other cities do it. Champlin does it. Hopkins does it. You can sample other cities, and it's a hearing process, and there is a defined standard of review. And I noticed that Mr. Councilman Coughlin was wondering, what is our standard of review here? Well, this isn't the due process. This is the chance for us to object to an assessment. You need to have a specific provision in your code that provides for procedural due process if you're going to impose fines such as this. And there's no doubt that they're fines. They're penal in nature. Other cities do similar things for very specific items, and they provide procedural due process. And so it's on that basis that we ask you to abate our violation and not assess our property $380. Now, I want to point out that, for 23 years, I've taken care of the cul-de-sac across from my home. I spent far more than $380 out of pocket to plant trees, fertilize grass, and mow the grass. And I understand that's that's city-controlled property. And me and the rest of the people in our cul-de-sac provide those services, and we've done that for years. And so it's somewhat insulting to us when we maintain our home in a very nice-looking condition to have a code enforcement officer say, oh, by the way, that ladder that I have to have a telephoto lens to pick up that's alongside your garage that was covered up with snow more than half the time during this 6 or 7 week time period results in not only in a special assessment, but in a criminal violation. And so I ask that you correct your process. I understand it's new, but you need to have things in place to make sure that people are fairly warned of what is legal, what is not, and what is a rule and what is not. You just can't say nothing can be stored outside, because that's not true. The city stores things outside. All kinds of residents store things outside. We do it all the time. And you can't leave it to discretion of one person to decide what you're going to allow and what you're not.
Thank you, Mr. Lundquist. Mr. Jamnick?
Mayor and Council, I was not going to interrupt Mr. Lundquist's first presentation, but the purpose of tonight's hearing is not to address the underlying substantive violation. As he indicated, that matter is being litigated currently. There's a criminal violation outstanding. What we're talking about tonight is the inspection, reinspection charges. And if the council wants to defer this one until we resolve the criminal matter, that would be fine with me as well. But the focus of tonight is not to address the underlying code violations or to provide a substantive review. It's rather to look at the process that the city used for inspection, reinspection, and whether those charges are appropriate.
Okay. And I'm going to go to Councilmember Coughlin and then Councilmember Sherry. Did you get queue again?
I took myself off, but as long as you've recognized me, if you don't mind, I pulled it off after I heard Mr. Jamnick's comments. But I guess even though we're not talking about specifics, there are a couple of things here that trouble me. One is, do we equip our staff with telephoto lenses?
Ms. Johnston.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Sherry, no, I believe that Mr. Forsland does have copies of pictures, and he may have some, be able to give
my
you
guess is
additional
that
information.
this may be one of the complaints that I personally have gotten. I've gotten well over 100 complaints about people leaving stuff outside on their garages, their properties, and I don't know. I'd have to look it up to see if yours was one of them, because I forwarded them to Ms. Faulkner and Mr. Forsland.
The area of the home that had the storage could not be viewed by anybody but one neighbor that didn't make a complaint.
As far as we know. And the other thing is that we've had a rule about not having our trash cans out in front of the house for as long as I've lived here, which has been 1976. So I don't think that that is anything new. I'm done here. Thank you.
Councilmember Coughlin.
Mr. Lundquist, I hope I've read carefully your objections. I hope you understand we're not in a position to make constitutional decisions. You made a number of legal and maybe good legal arguments. I don't know. But this council is not equipped to make those determinations. That is at the constitutional level. I appreciate it and I thank you for bringing that to our attention. It'll be interesting to see as we defer to our attorney and how that goes. But with this council is not equipped for that. To make those, you may, I can tell by your face, you may not agree with that, but believe me, I'm the only law-trained person up here, and I'm not. Those are serious issues, and will, I guess, be addressed at some other time. And so with that understanding, and again, I'm thanking you for bringing those to the attention, but I don't have the authority. First of all, it's not before us anyway, but even if it was, I would not make that determination. I am not in a position to decide whether something is constitutional or not.
But you do have the authority to provide ordinances that establish procedural due process for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
But sir,
and you need to do that,
right? And
because
I thanked you for bringing the general issue to our attention.
Yeah.
But we rely, as you know, as part of the process, we rely on our city attorney and their law firm, and they're a very reputable law firm. But ultimately, if there's some issue, then it'll be ferreted out and addressed. And I'm thanking you,
it's what other cities do.
To make us more self-aware, when we look at these things and think about these things. So I'm thanking you for that, but please understand, we cannot make that determination on this issue here today. So thank you for that.
You should, I think.
Councilmember Keeley.
Question for our city attorney, Mr. Jamnick. What would be the next step when we take the motion to defer these, where does it go from there? What are the next couple of steps?
It depends on which of these we are dealing with. On some of them, staff will do a workup of what the exchange was as far as notices, what the correspondence trail was, what phone conversations were recorded, look at the documentation. Some of them that have been issued citations, such as one we're currently talking about, will likely be resolved in court first, and then we'll bring it back to the council.
Okay, thank you.
And Mr. Lundquist, I will also echo, thank you for bringing it to our attention. What I understand is that you believe that what's happened here with you is there's a conflict, you believe, between our property maintenance code and our zoning code.
Because the zoning code
Says one thing and the property maintenance says another thing within the
for
zone.
single-family residences.
Yes. So I have that noted.
And I also want to point out, this takes place in the
This is about process about the code violation, and so I'm trying to be very clear about all of that. There's another piece here that Mr. Jamnik says that is not part of what we're here to talk about.
Well, okay, but I'm here to explain what happened in over a 6 or 7 week period between where we had, 3 or 4 major snowstorms.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, we're gone 3 or 4 days a week because
You're looking at the reasonable timeliness.
We're looking at the reasonable time.
Yeah, and that's
and
part
I'm
of
talking
what the review is going to be, because as I'm ticking out, I'm just listening for the piece that has to do with process and procedure and whether our staff act accordingly. So you're saying that you don't believe that it was reasonable time given to you because of the...
It was not reasonable time, and the point is, our garbage cans and our recycling container is in the garage, and was in the garage during this time that these fines are being assessed and things like that. We're talking about a yard waste bin. Those are kept outside routinely by homeowners.
Well, so that's one piece, and the other that you had brought up is that, do we have a due process in place?
The yard-based waste bin was covered, though, and that meets the zoning
And
ordinance.
that's the ordinance that's in conflict, and so that's what I have put down. So, thank you so much for bringing these items to our attention.
Thank you,
And
ma'am.
we appreciate your coming in this evening. So this is, item 02-54500-04-110. Thank you. Next, please.
Clarify, Madam Mayor, we are setting this one aside for deferral.
Well, yes, because there are some issues here that I think how did we evaluate the code violation? Did we use one zoning or property
I would concur with Mr.
ordinance?
Jamnik's suggestion for deferral pending the outcome of the other case.
Yes,
And then we can
and so those are the things when we go to adopt the entire,
I just want to circle the ones that we...
yes. And that's why I cited the parcel.
Gotcha. A harmonic tone.
Yeah.
Noting.
It's okay. Welcome, please give us your name and address for the record.
Buenas noches.
Good evening.
Traigo una persona que me traduzca porque mi primer lenguaje es el español.
I brought a person that can interpret for me because my first language is Spanish.
Mi nombre es Luz Anleu
My name is Luz and Leo,
y vivimos con mi esposo desde hace 11 años. Somos dueños de una propiedad.
and we lived here since for 11 years, and we're owners of a property.
En 1508 Joseph Street en Burnsville.
1508 Joseph Street,
Y estamos muy contentos y orgullosos de nuestra ciudad.
and we're very happy and proudful of our city.
Queríamos simplemente hacer un comentario,
Well, simply we would just like to make a comment,
pero lo escuché en las dos personas anteriores.
but I heard it in the previous two people.
Nos pasó exactamente lo mismo. Nosotros pensamos que el problema era nuestro lenguaje,
The same thing happened to us. We thought the problem was our language barrier,
que no podíamos entender la carta.
that we couldn't understand the letter.
Y pues quisimos traer esto debido a que Brownsville es una comunidad multiétnica.
And we love this city because it's a multi-ethnic city.
Y queríamos traer esto al council para hacer énfasis en que también hay personas que hablan diferentes idiomas.
And we wanted to bring this before the council because we wanted to make an emphasis that there are people here with different languages.
Nos pasó igual, no entendimos qué era lo que nos estaban diciendo.
It happened to us also. We didn't understand what was happening here. We just saw $9,520.
Tuvimos que preguntar a un intérprete que viniera a explicarnos qué era.
We had to ask. They had to ask me to come and explain to them.
Hablamos el inglés y somos ciudadanos americanos.
We speak some English and we're American citizens.
Pero igual nos pareció que la redacción de la carta nos hizo entender otra cosa.
But we had a different reaction from the letter, and it made us think something else.
Pero entendimos esta noche con las explicaciones que ustedes dieron.
But we understand tonight with the explanation that you guys gave.
Gracias.
Thank you.
Entendemos que tenemos que pagar $110 por una violación del código.
And we understand that we have to pay $110 for a code violation of a code.
Solamente tengo una pregunta, puede ser trivial, pero quisiera que me ayudaran.
I only have one question. It might be trivial, but I want you to help me with it.
La violación que nosotros cometimos fue tener los botes de la basura afuera.
The violation we committed was just having the garbage cans outside.
¿Dónde guardan usualmente los residentes de la ciudad los botes? Porque en nuestro garaje no caben.
Where would you put the garbage cans? Because in our garage they just don't fit.
En nuestra cuadra yo veo varias casas que tienen los botes afuera y nunca verdaderamente no sabíamos el código, que desde el año 71 estaba este código.
We're sorry that we understand now about that code being instituted since back then, and but the people in our neighborhood, they do have their trash cans outside.
No todos, pero algunas casas.
Not all of them, but some houses.
Para nosotros era normal, por 11 años nunca tuvimos problemas.
For us, we felt it was normal because for 11 years we've been doing it.
¿Dónde guardan los residentes de Bronxville los botes?
Where do the residents of Burnsville keep their trash cans?
In the garage.
Y si no
or
hay...
they're screened. Either in the garage or on the side of the house where it's screened. So it's not visible from the street.
Dice que al lado del garaje, si lo tienen con screen.
Y puede estar el screen hacia el lado de la calle.
Can the screen be towards the street?
Yeah, well, the screen, it'll be something that the garbage can isn't seen from the street. It's not visible.
Okay, ¿hecho de qué?
Made of what?
Mr. Forsland, it could be planting, and it also could be...
You can use pretty much just about anything, provided it's appropriate material.
¿Como madera?
Like wood?
Yes.
Yes.
Es como hacer
Shrubbery can be used.
Is it like just building a fence around it?
Yes.
Okay, muchas gracias. Eso queríamos saber. Siento que fue tan trivial la pregunta, pero no
that's
sabíamos
all we wanted
cómo.
to know. Sorry it was so trivial.
Oh, no, it's not trivial. Thank you for coming in. And the thing is, these complaints are generated when you get a visit from our inspection folks. It's because somebody complained. And so for 11 years, nobody complained, but I don't know what happened this time. So, you want to translate?
I understand
understand?
everything, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's easy for me to speak through another person in English, but thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Okay. All right, next.
I'm actually here on behalf of James Frazier at 1221 Early Shores Lane. He is in Afghanistan fighting for our country and could not be here. In this letter, I also was confused, and I called and said, why is there a $3,774 assessment? I talked to a Mary L. She had no clue and had to call me back the next day. Again, another poorly worded letter. This gives no date, no specific violation. Do you know what this is for?
Mr. Forsland, can you take a look at, and this is for Mr. James Fraser.
Right.
And the property and the project, the parcel number? And the address?
The address again, it's 121 Early Shores Lane. And he's been a resident of Burnsville since 1987. And he's pissed. He told me to put his house on the market, so when he comes back, he doesn't have to come back to Burnsville. And do you need the parcel number too?
Because everything, the codes are in the parcel number, please.
02-22490-02-010.
Weeds.
And that has to do with weeds?
Weeds where?
Okay,
When?
I don't have that one. Ms. Brooks, did you submit that to the clerk?
No,
Did you submit it?
Mary L. said I could bring it the day of
Yes.
the meeting.
Okay, I don't have, does it?
So what day is this from then? Or what year?
So,
I don't live here. I won't live in Burnsville. I live in Lakeville. I'm just here helping him out.
yeah, well, thank you for coming in and helping him out. On his property. This would be something that someone complained about who lives in the area, that perhaps it hasn't been mowed. And
You're talking about the city boulevard that the city's supposed to mow? Is that what it's
I
referring
really
to?
don't know. I don't know.
Okay. Do you have a date, a year, a month, any time?
I have no idea. Mr. Forsman.
Yeah, I think I might have an idea here. I don't believe this was on our written list for appealing this particular, and this is 1221 Early Shores Lane, correct?
Right.
We've got a chronology. I'm going to just give a chronology on this because this predates me, dating back to July of last year, 2012, where a complaint was received to the city. Initial inspection was made same day. We sent the first notice out the very next day, which would be July 18th. Reinspection on July 31 of last year. Non-compliant at that point. And
This is city property that the city takes care of.
this is
So this is from July of 2012.
okay. So the question is, the weeds are in the boulevard, correct?
Is that what you're? Is that what?
That's what the that's what the note is here.
When did
And
the city stop mowing the boulevard?
It has been always that the residents mow the boulevards.
Not on South Cross. No. They've mowed it for 17 years. That's his complaint.
Ms. Faulkner?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I believe we stopped mowing the boulevards in 2010, maybe even 2009. Yeah, certain boulevards.
Yeah. I think
What about
that's
this
when
boulevard?
we
What
went.
about this boulevard? Because Ron said, when I talked to him, he said that a notice went out in February of 2011 that they weren't going to mow it anymore. Jim was, again, he was in Iraq, in Kuwait this time. He didn't get any notice. And all of a sudden, it's like, what do you mean you mowed the lawn? It was mowed. From February through July, you guys never took care of the boulevard. There were so many prickly weeds on the end. I think that's what the picture, I said, show me the picture where you mowed it. No picture was ever sent. It took me about 10 requests from Ron to get the photos actually sent over. And this is supposed to be the city property. They come outside the house every Wednesday. They slam the gate. They mow all around. They pick up their blades, now I watch them, and they drive by on the sidewalk, and they go over to the next block. They're right there with their mower, and they miss the whole thing. So I don't know. And Jim, I told him Jim was in Iraq. He didn't get the notice. And then this is the first he's hearing of it, and now he's in Afghanistan, and he can't defend himself. So for how many years did the city mow that boulevard? 20? 30? And then they said because of the budget cuts, because the Performing Arts Center, they needed to cut back. I said, well, how much money are you saving when you lift up your blades and you go right by it anyway? They said, I don't know. He was never here to get the first letter. He wasn't here at the time. He's been gone. And you're assessing him, and it's just, like I said, there's no date on this thing. There's no specifics. These letters are just horribly written. So you're saying this is from July 2012.
that's what our records indicate.
When was he given this letter?
First notice was sent July.
No, that you guys aren't taking care of the boulevard anymore.
Can't answer that one.
Boy.
Yeah.
It has been, that has been adopted, and there were several hearings around that. It was 2009.
Madam Mayor,
Ms. Johnston.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the last time this came up, I believe we had some conversation that it was, we can confirm this, but that the decision was part of the 2009 budget cuts, and so that would have been in late 2009, early 2010 that they stopped mowing.
Even though they're right there with their mowers, they decided it would save them so much money to lift the blades, drop by, go the next block, drop the blades, and do the next part. I mean, that doesn't even make sense. You see the guy out there, you assume he's going to mow, because there's that common area right there that they mow. I mean, he's got his house in the market because of this letter. So if anybody wants to live there. So he wasn't around to get the notice, he wasn't around to get any violations, and he's not around now to take care of this piddly problem. So he wants it to go away. And he's got a letter that I wrote for him.
Okay, and the letter has been submitted to the clerk?
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe your letters could be a little more specific. This was over a year ago, and no one knows what you're talking about.
Okay.
And no one knew about this $3,700 either. They didn't know what that meant either.
Yeah.
And he was
And
also
so you
assessed.
called and talked to someone, Ms. Cole?
Mary L. She didn't know either. She had to wait another day to call me back because she didn't know what
Do
this
we have a
was.
Mary on our staff?
Yeah, she's our staff.
She's your staff.
Oh, Mary L.
Oh, Miriam.
Mary L. G.
Okay.
Yep. And then he was also assessed for South Cross, for paving South Cross. He doesn't live on South Cross. His address is Early Shores. But they were said because the city's out of money, you're double assessing him.
No.
Well,
I don't know who talked to you and said the city is out of money.
Because of the Performing Arts Center, the funds are out.
Thank you for continuing to go back and raising
Yeah,
that issue
no.
because it
Thank you
really
for
isn't.
bringing
Let's talk about what's
Well,
really
why would he
the
be
issue.
assessed for South Cross pavement project when
Is
his
he on a
address is
corner?
Early Shores?
Is this property a corner
Yes, it's
lot?
on the corner.
That's right.
So he gets assessed
it's-
for Early
yeah.
Shores projects and he gets assessed for South Cross projects.
If we did South Cross, then that he gets assessed for a portion of South Cross.
Why would he get
as well?
assessed for anything on a two-lane road that's common for the whole city to use?
Everybody gets assessed.
I get the street you live on, but why South Cross Drive? That's like a road.
Mr. Peterson.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, the way the policy reads for street construction
Yes.
is if you have a property adjacent to a street,
Yes.
you're assessed for it. On residential properties, there are corner lot adjustments. You're assessed 100% of your short frontage, 50% of the long frontage, but we do assess corner lots in that manner.
Even though it's like a thorough
Yeah.
road.
Yes, and that policy's been in place since 1990 or 80.
Early 90s, yeah.
Early
It
90s.
doesn't seem fair. Because the whole cul-de-sac use it and nobody else got assessed except the one guy that lives behind. And like I said, because of your harassment of him, he's moving since 1987. He says that house better be gone by the time I get back from Iraq. Or Afghanistan, I should say this time.
Thank you for bringing it in.
To the city. Thank you.
Next, please.
Good evening. My name's Philip Remeneski. I used to own a 8-unit condominium building at 12761 Greenwood Drive. I sold it last month. There is a new owner. I have a copy of the bill of sale stating it was supposed to close on August 15th. It closed on August 16th because there were some delays in getting information from the county with regard to a water bill and one other issue. I received on or about the 18th of August a bill from the city clerk stating I still owe $520. I don't own the property. These go with the building. I have proof with the HUD statements. I can show you that the city charged me $2,400 in fees, which I tried to appeal, as Mr. Forsland knows, and my lawyer knows, but Mr. Forsland would not go along with it. Didn't do what the law says. I decided, basically like a lot of these people, I just want out of Burnsville, frankly. That being said, just like the water bill, any fees that were assessed to the building go with the building. The building was sold before I was even given notice. And Joel knows all about this. And no offense, Mr. Coughlin, but he is another attorney who's up here, contrary to what you said. Correct, Joel? You are an attorney, correct, Joel?
Yes.
And you are aware of my sale, correct?
No, I was not.
Because my attorney, Brett Clark, was talking to you quite a bit, or so I was led to
I was
believe.
talking to one of my partners. I was not aware of your.
Oh, okay. Bottom line is, I can show you the documents. I didn't own it when they subsequently assessed it. And I'm not here to appeal it. I expect it to be removed immediately because it has no right to be here in the first place. And if that is what's requested, it will be going to another level. Because I've got the proof, and it should never have been done in the first place. I've lost literally $250,000 in my retirement because of Mr. Forslund and how the city has treated me over many years and the former inspectors. And I'm sorry to get emotional, but it's a lot of money to me. And it means a lot. And to, after selling it, to still have people try to screw me over is beyond me. There is a basic phrase, as Joel and Mr. Coughlin knows, in court. It is so egregious, it shocks the system. And that is what the city is still doing to me. I expect it removed immediately. And if I may approach Mr. Janik, I'll give you copies to prove what I'm saying.
Thank you, Mr. Romaneski.
And I would ask for a decision now.
Well, we don't have all of the facts that you have, but
Mr. Janik has them, right?
And
there.
I think, Ms. Faulkner, you have some background information. Are you aware of this particular issue?
Madam Mayor, members of the council, we have not been able to confirm that the sale actually happened. So
it's notarized right there.
So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, we would ask that you defer this so that our attorneys can verify and with the county that the documents have been filed. And certainly, if there is a cross and error, we certainly will take care of that as reasonable.
Councilmember Sherry?
I think that that's wise advice. But in the meantime, I'm just concerned about the water bill, which I know is the city's doing. No, wait, but please, excuse me. May I finish? And that is that I'm assuming the water was consumed.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, someone has to pay for it. Mm-hmm. That's all I want to know. Thank you.
Okay. Very
May
good.
I have the floor?
Yes, please.
Yes.
You're now
Not
recognized,
only
Mr. Romaneski.
was the water bill paid because of the way it happens at a closing, and apparently, no disrespect, you don't know how closings and transfer of property takes place in Burnsville. Burnsville will not allow you to transfer a property unless they have 1.5 times the former water bill put in escrow. So there's far more money in escrow for a water bill than is even real. So clearly, no offense, madam, you don't know about real estate transfers in your own city.
I do.
Well, then
Trust
you would have
me.
known that.
Trust me, I do, and that's why I asked.
I believe I have the floor, madam.
Excuse me.
May I still have the floor.
May I please be recognized?
Yes.
And that is,
you
I'm
already made your
assuming,
point, Councilmember
I'm
Sherry.
assuming that Mr. Jamnik will get this
Yes.
straightened out, and that he will inform the council as to where the council stands legally on this, and that the city will be compensated for the water used.
Okay. Mr. Romaneski, thank you.
One last point
Romaneski.
I would like to make. 2 things. Number one, I'm sorry for getting a bit emotional. I've owned that building since 1995. I've been a landlord for 20 years. I've owned 16 properties in 3 states. This is the only city I've ever dealt in that screws people over, frankly, landlords, so badly. And I was surprised to hear how they screw their own residents over, too. Additionally, Mr. Coughlin claimed that this is the council we elected. As a landlord, I couldn't elect any of you because I'm not allowed to vote because I don't live in Burnsville.
Councilmember
cannot
Coughlin.
vote.
Excuse me, sir, I never made that claim this evening.
Yes, you
Excuse-
did. It's on the record.
Councilmember Coughlin, and please recognize when the floor.
You did make that comment, sir.
No, I didn't.
Councilmember Coughlin.
I didn't make the comment that we were elected. What I said is we had no authority as the elected officials to make a determination on a constitutional matter. That's in fact what,
no.
sir,
That's what you
sir, that's what I said. And when you corrected me to note that there was another lawyer up here, I was talking about members of the council and not our legal counsel as to being able to make a constitutional determination on due process for the ordinance. So that, I'm sorry, maybe you heard otherwise, but I'm telling you what I said, and that is what I said. I didn't reflect that you elected us, so we do this or not do this. I said that as elected, as for those particular issues, as elected officials, I could not make that constitutional determination. That is what I said.
I'm
Thank
referring to, if I may, Madam Mayor, that you said this early on in the presentation. Number two, the other incident you referred to about being up here, clearly Mr. Jamnik is up here. So it wasn't a misunderstanding on my part. You may have misphrased it, but it was not a misunderstanding on my part.
Thank you, Mr. Romaneski. I am now going to recognize Mr. Jamnik, and then we will rule on your issue at the next council meeting. Mr. Jamnik.
Mayor and Council, that is exactly what I was going to say, is that it's a relatively simple matter for us to verify the sale and what we did to inform the parties on that sale of fees and charges that were due at the city. We'll research that and get a report back to the council at your next meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And does the clerk have that particular property also? So, next, please.
My name is Mary Lundquist. I, too, have been a longtime resident of Burnsville. I've lived here since 1979.
And your husband spoke.
My husband has already spoke.
Scott, yes.
Correct. I, too, am being charged, being assessed $380 and am being charged criminally for this little matter. I've had to spend 3 days in court already and watch drunk drivers and people with controlled substances get off with little slaps on the hand, and still they want to put us in jail for 90 days in jail each. Anyway, I came up here in response to Ms. Sherry's comment about no garbage cans in the city of Burnsville. That's always been that way.
Since I've lived here.
On August 22nd, my husband and I drove around we went to the neighborhood across the street here. We went down just a couple streets. We have 50 photographs of people with garbage cans that are visible on the sides of their house. We also went over to the Lake Alamagnet house, which is over by the park there where the baseball fields are. Mm-hmm. And I can show you this. What do you suppose is next to your city house? 3 garbage cans and a blue tarp with covering whatever. I mean, so I don't know if the gentleman that you hired that goes around doing these citations has just decided to pick on certain people or certain neighborhoods, but I'm just totally offended by your comment, thinking that it's okay or that nobody does it, and that's the way it is. And then we just drive down a couple streets across the street here, and most of the neighborhood all has their garbage cans in plain sight, plus your city house does. So,
okay. Councilmember Sherry.
Miss, I hope you reported those addresses to our inspections department, because they would gladly ticket those people.
Well,
and I will tell you this, the most of the complaints I get, and I don't know about the other council members, are about trash cans. I can't tell you the number I get. And I've lived here since 1976, and when I moved in, I was told it was the city ordinance that we had to keep our trash cans inside. And in almost 37 years, that's where my trash cans have been. And if people are not following this, it's because they don't care about their neighbors, they're lazy, or they've got too much junk in their garage and they have no room for them and they don't bother screening them. That doesn't change the ordinance. So if you have those pictures and if you have those addresses, would you please give them to our code enforcement?
I'm not going to make somebody else go through what
Why
we
not?
had to go. Well,
That's because don't you want our city to look good?
I-
Don't you want our city, would you please, yes or no?
You know what?
Yes or no?
Our waste bin was not noticeable until the wind blew it over. That's what started this, and we had all that snow. And we
Perhaps
don't go on that side of the house, and our neighbor who lives over there, she didn't even notice it.
Perhaps one of your neighbors complained to me. I don't
doubt
know.
it. I know for a fact
I
they
don't
didn't.
know.
I know for a fact they didn't.
Okay.
I don't know.
I know for a fact they
I'm going to go to Councilmember Nguyen.
Well, I was just wondering if we could clarify once again, when an inspection is done, is it typically generated through a call from somebody saying, would you please come and look at this, it's bothering me, or I don't know if this is in violation, or do we just drive around and if we notice something?
We receive many
Mr. Forsland.
Sorry. We receive many complaints regarding these very types of issues, and I totally agree that number one on a call hit parade, our trash cans being visible from the road could be part of our proactive program as well. And that is, our goal with that program is to cover the whole city in 3 years. And
It's my understanding that you've actually hired somebody, and his job is to drive through the neighborhood. My girlfriend did some research
that's
on this.
correct.
And she talked to him because she got cited because she started laying mulch in her yard, and she had 2 bags of mulch in her gardens, and it started raining, and she couldn't get to it for several days, and the guy drove by and cited her, which...
we always give notice. I think that's always
You
been.
give notice and you give them a
notice.
timely manner to cure the issue. So you notice it and then you tell her that they have to put it
But
away.
you have hired somebody, and he drives through the neighborhoods. So if he's driving through our neighborhood, why isn't he driving through the neighborhood just across the street?
Ms. Faulkner.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, Ms. Lundquist, we have a map on our website that shows which neighborhoods he'll be going to. I think it's broken down by quarters. So you can see it'll take him 3 years to go through the whole city. So we've got a schedule up there for the public to look at, and it probably was on that given day that he was by your friend's house that those series of events happens. But yes, most of our complaints most of our violations come in from complaints, and then we do have our proactive program where he's going through the city.
Yeah, and it's on the website. And so people know which neighborhoods he's going to be driving through.
That's what a waste of taxpayer dollars to actually hire somebody to drive through.
Councilmember Sherry, and then I'm going to go to Councilmember Nguyen, and then Mr. Forsland. Yeah.
Sorry. Madam Mayor, Council, I think it's important to recognize, too, that the Lundquists have incurred a total of $380 in reinspection fees. That was upon 3 inspections that had gone uncorrected on March 26th, April 16th, and May 6th. It's not a singular fee that was assessed.
Right. Okay. Well, the ladder was so buried with all those snowstorms, we couldn't get at it, and covered with ice. I mean, what are you supposed to do? Okay. And nobody could see it.
Okay.
Because we had 2 cars in front of the garage.
Mrs. Lundquist, I think we're deferring yours, and we're going to have but thank you.
Maybe when we get out of jail, we'll come in and take care of this. I mean, it's so crazy. When I tell people that we're being charged criminally for our garbage cans being on the side of our house, they're like, "Where do you live?"
Thank you.
So,
Councilmember Nguyen.
Well, I can hear frustration from the residents, and I think part of it is, just like you said, I drive through my neighborhood and see garbage cans sitting out sometimes. So I think people are maybe feeling, gosh, why does my neighbor have the garbage cans out and yet I'm getting a violation for it? And so that's why I brought up the point, is it because somebody specifically calls about a certain house? Because if a whole neighborhood, which there are quite a few, have garbage cans, or maybe they haven't done the full assessment or inspection of that part of the city, or, I can understand the frustration. I could see why am I being targeted, and, so-and-so is doing the same thing, and they don't seem to be going through the same thing as I am. And so I don't know if do you think that that's possible, that perhaps somebody complained about a certain residence, but maybe the inspectors haven't gotten to that area, and that's why they're kind of being targeted, and that, I don't know. But I'm kind of feeling that people are wondering, why am I being targeted when the same thing's going on in the city?
Mr. Forsland, did you want to respond to that?
I just
before
going
go through
to make a
list?
comment regarding to that, Madam Mayor. It does appear sometimes that that's the case. Oftentimes, the complaints come in from the neighbors repeatedly, and yes, staff do get involved in that. We try to sort it out as best we can, but a complaint is a complaint, and if it's valid, we're going to enforce it.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Sherry.
Well, I'd just like to tag on what Councilmember Nguyen said, and that is, a couple of years ago, I had an acquaintance who contacted me about a complaint about her neighbor's property. And one of the issues was trash cans, but there were also many other property violations. I went down and took a look at it, and it was a mess. But she did say to me that when the inspector came, he nailed everybody in the neighborhood. So it isn't being singled. These people are not being singled out. And I do think that it is not a waste of taxpayer money. I've been on this council since I was elected in 2008, and since that time, I've heard nothing but complaints about the deteriorating appearance of our neighborhoods and our properties. And I'm really sick of it. I'm just sick of it. And so I compliment you, Mr. Forsland. I have heard nothing but compliments from you, even from some people who you've given warnings to. They've said, you know what, I know I needed to do this. And I just think it's really unconscionable that anybody would ignore something for so long that it would have to go to court. That's nuts. Don't you care about your neighbors? And I'm speaking to anybody who might be watching. This is a question of caring about our neighbors and caring about one another and taking pride in our own property and taking pride in our community. And it's worth every dime.
Ms. Johnston.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, there's just a couple of pieces of information for the public that I wanted to share. The first piece is the schedule online. If you go to www.burnsville.org/property, you can get information both on the property licensing. There's a link right there where you can see what the schedule is. We have it by quarter. And so if your property was not in those particular areas by quarter, it is likely that a complaint generated that particular issue. The second point of clarification that I'd like to give folks is the property tax dollars. The council's recommendation for this entire ordinance was to fund this proactive property maintenance with the revenue associated with the reinspection fees for rental licensing, but also fines. And one of the good and difficult things about this kind of an initiative is, the good thing is people are complying. We actually aren't having the revenue estimates that we thought, because it has been a successful effort in that people are complying with these particular, when they get the first notice, they do comply within the 10 days. And so I just wanted to share that information for you all to clarify for the public about what is property tax dollars versus other revenue sources related directly to that activity.
Madam Mayor. Yeah.
I have to go to Councilmember Coughlin first, and then I'll come back to you, Councilmember Sherry.
I just want to say, Ms. Lundquist, that maybe you saw it on TV, maybe you didn't, I don't know. I don't know if you watched for the 2 years or year and a half build up to us passing this ordinance and watched all the people that came up and complained about the problems in Burnsville, including trash cans being out, that I did as I sat on this council, sat in these work sessions for a year and a half. The last thing this council wanted, we're not the kind of council that tries to find a solution to or create something for the sake of creating it. In fact, there's a presumption of ideology on this council that we want to stay out of people's lives. But it was week after week after complaint after complaint after complaint that we had to sit and listen to and be insulted by all kinds of different people coming up here and accusing us of doing nothing about it, allowing the city to deteriorate, Ms. Lundquist. And I don't recall a whole nother group of people showing up saying, you know, this is ridiculous, the city's beautiful, everything's fine, because those people never showed up. It was all the other complainers, and there were a whole bunch more of them than the 6 or couples out here complaining about that before we passed the statute. Now, I think the statute, Ms. Lundquist, will be looked at by the attorney as your husband's proposed to make sure that it qualifies constitutionally, and I think that's a valid recommendation. But to come up here then and insult us like you've done when you don't, when I've looked at all the evidence and you have not. I'm sorry about your particular situation. I'm sorry about your point of view, and you're totally entitled under the First Amendment to have your opinion, as I am. But you were not here for that year and a half gathering the evidence that this council did, because the last thing that we wanted to do is have to pass an ordinance in this community to deal with this problem, but that is what the unanimous conclusion of the council was. So for that, I hope that, you know, hopefully your problem will get resolved in your life, but then you will think about the other side of the ledger instead of coming up here and talking about wasting taxpayers' dollars. Believe me, we considered all those issues. We thought about that. We looked at the evidence, and that's the conclusion we drew. Maybe you would have drawn a different conclusion, notwithstanding it was a unanimous vote with this presumption of ideology. But that is the way it was. So I'm not here to insult you. I'm not insulting you. You're entitled to your opinion. But it does sometimes offend me that when people come up and talk about that it gets insulting when they don't know all what had gone into making the decision that we had made in this regard. So thank you.
Yeah, and it is about no property tax dollars went into this effort. It is all about the fees and charges. And Councilmember Sherry, you have the floor.
I have one last thing to say, and that is that, how long ago has it been that we dealt with Country Village Apartments?
Oh, my.
And that took over a year to deal with those violations, and people were saying, yes, how can this terrible thing happen in Burnsville? Why is this happening? You've got to be tougher with the apartment owners, and this is terrible for the people who live there. It's just awful for the neighbors. It's a pit. It's a slum, all of which it was. So now that got cleaned up. Great. So now we try to clean up the single-family residences, and most of the time we get nothing but thank you. So I hope that's what you're going to say right now.
No, because my husband and I, we take care of our yard. Our shrubs.
You have a big ladder out hanging on the side of your house.
It was not.
I don't care.
On the ground.
I don't care. I don't care. That's a violation. It's a violation.
Okay, I don't think it serves us well to argue.
It's insulting for us to be charged criminally, is what I'm saying. You know,
I need to address the gentleman who's been very patient. Standing, we already made a decision about deferring yours until we get all of the information. So I'm going to move on, but thank you.
I wasn't offending you in that, but I'm offended by the idea that we're being charged criminally.
Yeah.
You know, for
If you had just responded, I don't think you would be charged.
well, how would we have moved that underneath all that snow and ice?
That's what's going to be coming up when we do the review. Thank you, Mrs. Lundquist. Please, and thank you so much for being so very patient. And please give us your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and members of the council. My name's Lee Schoen. I am the manager of a mobile home park here in Burnsville, Camelot Acres, Arbor Vista as we call it now.
Oh, sure.
I took that job a year ago, and I just want to say thanks in some ways. What the group have done with the violations, it's caused, oh my gosh, more jobs than I ever thought of, but it also has saved a lot of work in that community for myself and others around. I mean, to clean up a community like that, when I think me and my wife drove through it the first time, it was like, whew, tough job. But anyway,
Yeah,
I
and
think
you
it's-
know,
I think-
your management folks, I think the people you work for, you work for Arbor
I
Vista?
work for a corporate.
Yes.
And it's
Well, all of your
phenomenal.
management folks were all part of this process and hearing, because in putting the ordinance together, a lot of people were a part of that, and your folks were a part
Well, I
of
think,
that.
you know, like I said, they're corporate. I don't know what was all done. I just took it over a year ago. When I was notified by Mr. Oakland in the spring of this going on and the violations and so forth, I wasn't really clear on what was going on and how it was going to do it. I just knew what the general purpose was, and I agreed with it. Like I said, I fully cooperated, everything we can do. I think that they're more than fair to many people out there. I've had several residents that have had tough times, issues, inability to do certain things, as they stated earlier. As long as they were contacted, the group, Ted and Chris and everybody's worked with them to give them more time. They've worked with them to allow me to work with them. And I guess what I'm here tonight is I got this letter from the city clerk, and it says the 9,000 thing did kind of throw me, but it was actually sent to me from corporate office, so I didn't actually get it directed at the property. I'm not sure. I think I got it to corporate, and then they faxed it to me. And we're going to pay this bill, and of course anything that's got to be paid has got to be approved by me. And I was like, well, I don't know. Let me look what it is. So I guess my question to this is I see proposed assessment against your property, specific improvement, code violations, and it's $1,504. Excuse me, I didn't bring my cheaters with me tonight, but it's $1,540. Then of course it tells you how to pay it and so forth. My question is that all that we're going to be assessed with these violations through the whole year or through the whole process?
Mr. Forsman?
That's going to be the sum that's outstanding right now.
Outstanding.
That will not be through the whole year.
Okay, so that's just now currently.
Correct.
And that is from assessment of people didn't pay their bill, didn't pay their fine?
Correct, because the park is still the owner of record on the property.
Yep, I understand that, and I was aware of that it would be assessed then to the property taxes of the property owner if it wasn't paid. And so what the corporate people are wanting me to do is find out, okay, so now we got $1,540 bill. Obviously, that's from people that didn't pay their bill or that didn't pay their fine. Am I correct in that?
Correct.
And then, do I direct you or
No, it's all right, because Mr. Forsland is the one who has all the records.
Thank you.
And so here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to, if you don't have any complaint directly to us, is Mr. Forsland can help you break all of that down, because I think at the end of the day, what you want to know is that who is it that you need to go and collect that money from?
Well, obviously that's going to come out the last of it.
Yeah.
But I think that's who he can. That's where that department can come help me. My question to you folks is that, and we had a meeting here. Was it last week?
Last week.
Last week and it was great. The residents came up. These guys put on a great show for them. Explained everything. There was a lot of people got a good questions, and we got a meeting coming up next week for the park to help. But the big concern in this community is not so much cleaning up the yards. Everybody knows that your neighbor's yard's junky, clean it up. We're after that. That's my job too. The big thing in this community, members of the council and Madam Mayor, is that the shed to be removed and taking these sheds 5 feet away from the homes, and some of these sheds, I've had residents 30-some years live there, and it was fine for 30 years. Why is it not now? And this poor old lady can't afford or have any means to do so, so we're trying to put together some help in the park. I guess my ultimate question is it possible that with this amount of, it's a vast number of sheds that have to be moved in this community away from these homes and in safety zones for fire purposes and whatever. I know we've come up with alternative measures and so forth, but I got a list of people just scared to death.
Work with our staff, and they won't be scared.
Well, what they asked me was, what they said to me the other night is they don't have the authority to grant any kind of extensions or anything in the from being fined. Is that right? The shed thing
Mr.
was
Forsland? That's all part of the timeline in curing the issue.
Madam Mayor and Council, we can be pretty flexible with some of this. We've tried to address it on a case-by-case basis. We had several people up here that we looked at their individual files and tried to come up with some alternatives. There's many of them, of the problems, there isn't going to be an easy solution. That's the bad news. There are going to be situations where they're either going to have to be moved, their sheds, whether they've had them 30 years or not. Some of them are not in the best of shape either. So we got a couple different things. I guess I would advise at this point we'll have to keep picking away on a case-by-case basis and see what we can do to help everybody down there. We've had a lot of opportunity or a lot of solutions we talked about that might work for some folks, and yet still ensure that we have a safe community down there.
I think the other things that, and I would work with Chris and his group there because, like I said, they've been very cooperative with us, and I thank you guys for having them work with us as much as they have. But in these letters, I would hope that maybe in the future, somehow maybe a line in there that would help in a situation like in my community that has a lot of Spanish families and a lot of multicultural families, that we have just a line in there that if they have a question, they can maybe get a hold of the city people, and that they would have some way to get that translated to them. I just see this being they come in my office wide-eyed, they're just scared to death that this letter from the city came, they don't understand it.
Okay, Mr. Forsland, do we have a translator?
Absolutely. We had a translator last week. We weren't aware that this was going to be a problem. This is our first pass through this, and in future, in retrospect, what we'd probably do is do a meeting ahead of time. And I think that would help a little bit, and certainly have some translation services available. We did have some folks show up last week that utilized the service. That was good. So.
And you resolved it?
We resolved it. We also printed, or are in the process of printing, a lot of these things into Spanish as well.
I did get a copy of that.
Oh, you did get it? Good.
We're going to copy that and put it out next week at our community meeting.
Excellent.
The other thing I was going to put in there, if I could, without...
Yes, please.
No, we're...
I'm just seeing the people who want to speak, but you still have the floor, and then I'll have to go to Councilmember Keeley.
Yes, would be that keeping in mind that manufactured housing is a lower income community, and these folks don't have a lot of money, and they're $110 or $220 or whatever they're going to end up with fines. It's going to be really hard for some of them to pay. I know I try to drag the rent out of them every month, but not to give any plight on it. I think that it's something that we got to maybe think about as far as some of these families when they call up, and I've had a few of these people tell me, okay, I did this, I tried to do this, and I said, call Ted, because Ted actually, he's been out there meeting with people right in their yard, helping them understand what needs to be done. But I think when it comes to the fines, they're all afraid that they've already not paid it. So I think that they're thinking that they're going to get some sort of the legal repercussion on it, and maybe some clarification to them on when that comes out, what the system is, so it breaks down like you told these people tonight, how it breaks down, that you're getting the warning, and then they never got really any kind of a warning in the community other than just me talking about it to them. And I think that was something that really, for the other communities you're going to be doing and other things you're going to have, I think that would be a big help to them too. Other than that, I just wanted to know the $1,540, we're going to have to pay that, and then we're still going to get more of these yet this year.
Mr. Forsland?
First off, I want to clarify something there. Everybody gets notice, including the tenant, and the park management. Lee is copied on those.
Yep.
So we do that. We treat everybody uniformly and consistently as best we can. So that's something I wanted to clarify on that. As far as, and I'm not quite sure you got this assessment letter?
Yeah, it's bill, it actually says invoice.
Yeah, that's the assessment letter. Okay, I just wanted to verify what you had there. Assessments are once a year. Some cities do it multiple times. So you shouldn't...
This is for the code violations that people didn't pay, correct?
Correct. Those are outstanding. They're still pending onto the property.
Okay. So my corporate asked me today when I went, I was going to pay the bill, and I said the meeting's coming tonight. Why don't I go to the meeting and ask these questions, and then I can. I tried calling right before that. I tried calling the city clerk's office right before the holiday. And
I think what you're seeing there is the sum total based on a single property ID number.
for the property itself. This is a sum total for just as it stands currently, but it could increase then?
No, that will not
not this
increase.
year.
Not this year.
You could incur more violations.
But you could incur more for next year.
You get charged
So
after.
every year, they're going to be, they're going to inspect this community every year for the same thing we did this year?
No, not every year.
I was understanding it was every 3 years.
Correct.
Yeah.
But that doesn't preempt.
Complaints.
Complaints.
No. Well, hopefully I'm taking care of these violations in between you guys. It's 3 years is my whole thinking on this. If I'm, but the $1,500 is what we're going to have to pay this year as it stands right now.
Correct.
$1,540. Okay, so I can tell the court we can put that check in the mail then, and not expect another check this year.
Bill.
Or bill, I mean. Excuse me.
Correct.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you, members of council, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you
Is there
so
anything-
much. Thank you for
questions
coming
me?
in. Councilmember Keeley.
This is for city staff, but you can remain because it relates to your property. Those sheds that have been there for as many as 30 years, at the time that those sheds were constructed and put where they're at, what was our city ordinance at the time?
Most still required a building code or a building permit, most which did not receive one.
Okay.
And the rules regarding manufactured home parks have been around for a long time, especially that space separation.
Okay.
They probably were illegal from the beginning.
Yeah.
I think
There are
that was
state
the-
statutes.
That was the big thing, was
Correct.
people
State statute.
obviously hadn't had it pressed to them yet, and I think that's the big shocker, is you get most of these folks, well, this has been kind of like my garbage cans have been out beside my house for 10 years. Well, all of a sudden now you can't have them there. And I think the same thing with the sheds was the folks were so astounded that the city came in and told them the shed can't be there that close to their home, but the park allowed it for, and nobody's ever said anything for this amount of time. And I think that was the big concern with a lot of the residents. And even, like I say, some of my very, very prominent residents that I consider the top line, they're into the, well, why do I got to move my shed? And they've even came up with fire code solutions that would allow them not to move sheds in some cases to prevent fire spreading.
Yeah.
And that's what they have, and which has been a godsend to some of them. So, anyway, thank you guys.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Coughlin.
Just one last thing, and sorry about going on. To our city attorney, just for clarification, it's my understanding that nothing that we did when we changed the ordinance has really affected how the criminal process is applied to violations of that ordinance. In other words, prior to what we did most recently, applying fees and charges and the maintenance code, prior to that, there were criminal charge opportunity for violations of...
That's correct.
So I just want to clarify, Ms. Lundquist, that nothing that we did, we didn't change anything to cause that. That happened before us, and for a long time before people it can be charged through the process criminally for various maintenance stuff in most communities. So,
Okay. Instead of just going on, I need to move this.
But that's not true.
I'll defer.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
And then they charge you.
I'm sorry. I'll defer to council. Is that most communities, if you violate?
I can't help it, he's not being honest with you.
Okay. I think we need to move on. Councilmember Coughlin.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Members of the council, there were 128 properties, as you have in your background, that were cited for violations, and we have 5 that 106.
66 was the total of the assessments.
Yeah, 66, but there were 62 that were delinquent. 126 in the complete, the packet that we received. Yeah, 128.
I believe that's correct.
Okay.
128. So out of that, there were 5 objections, and I need a motion to adopt the rest and defer the ones that we had set aside for staff to bring back next council meeting.
Mayor, can you clarify which ones those are?
Correct.
Yes, and Ms. Faulkner will cite the properties that
Correct, Madam Mayor.
that they're going to bring back.
I have 3 deferrals from my notes. 11319 West River Hills Drive, that was Ms. Lucanic. The Lundquist property, 905 Kmore Lane, and that was pending the court action, and then Mr. Remeniski's 12761 Greenwood Drive. Those were the three I had.
Yeah. We didn't do anything with the guy from Iraq.
Mr. Frazier's property.
Mr. Frazier's property.
I didn't have that.
She did.
Mayor and Council, I'd recommend we defer that one as well to verify the notice exchange. If he was out of the country
Yes.
and doing service, the council has adopted a deferred assessment program
That's right,
for
we have.
military leaves. So I would like to check the records on that to see whether or not we had any exchange back and forth from anybody at that property to acknowledge the initial notification.
Absolutely.
Because as we discussed this evening, these charges are not levied on the first notice or even the second. This is down the road 3 or 4 times in the exchanges before the bills are incurred.
And I think we need the record for us to also be very clear and understand what took place between the transactions, between our staff and the property owners, so that we understand the procedure and the process that they had complied, and because that's what we're reviewing.
Agreed.
Okay, so there are 4 properties that we are deferring, and staff will bring back the background and all of the information for us to review. May I have a motion, please, to adopt and defer the 4
Move to adopt and defer the 4.
that have been identified by staff? Okay.
Second.
Councilmember Sherry makes the motion, second by Councilmember Coughlin. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much. The next item is item number 9. Item number 9 is a resolution to adopt the proposed budget and certify the 2014 proposed tax levy to Dakota County Treasurer and Auditor. This is the max tax. And presenting this evening is Ms. Kelly Stray, our Finance Director. Ms. Stray, welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. Tonight's budget meeting is one of our shorter ones because we have already had 3 meetings regarding the max tax, and most recently, August 12th, we reviewed the details of the proposed max tax and got direction from you. Earlier, we had a June 11th meeting where we discussed the financial management plan and the 5-year budget pressures. And also July 9th, we discussed debt planning and the city's debt policies. Upcoming meetings that you will be having, October 29th, departments will present their budget information to you at a work session. And November 12th and 26th, you will be having detailed discussions about the proposed property taxes. And finally, budget adoption on December 3rd. The next, the 3 items tonight are related. First, the council will adopt or consider adopting the maximum city tax levy. This is required to be adopted by September 15th, and it sets a limitation of the maximum amount of property tax that can be levied for this year. And then we will recess and have the Economic Development Authority address the Economic Development Levy. And finally, we'll resume the City Council meeting, and the City Council meeting also must approve the EDA levy max. So the first action is to adopt a resolution adopting the proposed budget and certify the 2014 proposed tax levy to the Dakota County Treasurer Auditor. The total proposed max is $28,524,303, and the total EDA amount would be $542,500 for a grand total of $29,066,803. This represents an increase of $436,000 for current services and some of our capital plans. It also represents, which I might add is 1.6% increase. It also represents EDA levy increase of $25,000, which is a 0.1% increase to the total tax levy. And we have an increase of $1.1 million to the Infrastructure Trust Fund, which was a planned increase that the council has discussed for a number of years and had in their financial plans for many years. It is offset by additional tax base coming in from the decertification of TIF District 2 at the end of this year. So the net effect to individual property tax owners would be 0 on that for an increase. That represents a 4% increase to the total tax levy, however. The total tax increase is $1,561,041. This year there is a state levy limit. The proposed levy that we are talking about here would be under the levy limit by $160,000, so we are complying with that levy limit. I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Stray. I think we have heard this and directed staff to bring this to us for adoption. Members of the council, do you have any questions for Ms. Stray? Or just to clarify to the folks at home that, as you mentioned, this is the decertification that makes for the 4% because the rest of it is really a trace. It's way below, but the 4% of the total increase comes from existing money that's moving from the tax increment financing District 2 decertification and moving it into the general fund. And
Madam Mayor, that is correct.
Okay.
And the new money amount is percentage?
It's 1 point.
It would
The
be a
new
total
money-
of 1.7%.
1.7. So that makes it.
And then also, there's also new construction within the city that will offset a portion of that. About half of that increase is offset by new construction coming online in the tax base as well.
And that's where it gets to almost about
0.8.
0.8. Okay. Would someone, Councilmember Sherry?
I would just like to clarify that by our vote tonight, we are saying that this would be the most we would increase the city budget. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
That would be the maximum. Doesn't necessarily mean that that would be the final city budget. That would be, we could not exceed what we vote tonight. Is that correct?
Yes, Councilmember Sherry.
And so that our final vote will be in December. Is
That's
that
correct,
correct?
on the 3rd.
All right. I just want to make that clear. And in doing that, I would move that we adopt the 5.7 increase.
Okay.
Second with discussion.
Yes, Councilmember Sherry makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. And now, Councilmember Keeley, you have the floor.
I'll further clarify that, Councilmember Sherry. What we are approving tonight is a maximum tax on existing taxpayers of roughly 0.8%. Is that correct, Ms. Stray?
On existing taxpayers, yes.
Correct.
After factoring in the new construction.
Right.
Yes.
The balance of the funds are TIP decertification and new construction, so all fresh new money, bigger pie.
Yeah.
Some of that tax deferment is just being now retained instead of redistributed. What, in your opinion, would that mean to the average homeowner and the average commercial property owner?
The average homeowner would see about a 33% per year, $33 per year.
Yeah.
Am I scribbling? Even with cheaters. $33 per year. And the commercial would actually see, and that is the average home, which is about $192,000 value. When we calculate on $1 million commercial property, which is just a number that we've used in our analysis over the years, that would actually be a decrease of $56 per year. The reason why the residential properties would be going up while the commercial properties are going down has to do with the values. The tax levy, you have control over setting the total amount of the tax levy. That is spread to all of the properties within Burnsville based on their values. And as values change, the piece of the pie that each particular property might get changes slightly. And as we look at the valuations of commercial property as they're set by Dakota County every year, commercial property is very flat. It has not seen an increase, an average of 0%, really. There are some that might be up and some might be slightly down, but generally speaking, 0%. While the homes in Burnsville averaged a 3.6% increase in their value, and there was a wide range of increases. Each individual homeowner will see something different, but on an average it was 3.6% increase. So the residential part of the pie grew, and the commercial part shrunk, and which is an opposite thing as what has been happening over the last several years. It's a shift back.
And that is something that the state sets the rate.
Right.
And we only do yes. Councilmember Keeley.
Thank you. So in close, what we're doing is setting a maximum amount that we can increase taxes in the city of Burnsville on existing taxpayers of about $2.50 a month. We may actually choose not to do that in December when we vote on the final tax. And that $2.50, if it were to stay by December, would mean the average homeowner would pay $2.50 a month to maintain all existing services that the city provides for their taxpayers.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. Now, is there further discussion? There's a vote on the floor. Councilmember Sherry makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. There's no further discussion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. I will now recess the Burnsville City Council meeting so the Economic Development meeting can take place. President Keeley, your meeting.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and Commissioner Couts. I will call the order of the Burnsville Economic Development Authority, and please let the record show that all commissioners are present. Our first item on the agenda is a consent agenda item, approval of our June 4th special meeting. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion made by Commissioner Coughlin, seconded by Commissioner Wynn. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passed. On the irregular agenda, we have a resolution authorizing a proposed levy of a special benefit levy pursuant to Minnesota Statute Section 469.033, Subdivision 6, and approval of a proposed budget for fiscal year 2014. Commissioners, any questions on the levy proposed to vote on tonight?
Nope. Ms. Stray already defined all of the points.
Thank you. Well, with nothing further, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Coughlin, seconded by Commissioner Sherry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And the motion carries. Miscellaneous items, anyone? Seeing none, motion to adjourn the EDA.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Sherry, seconded by Commissioner Wynn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? And we stand adjourned. Madam Mayor, turn back over to you.
Thank you. I will now reconvene the Burnsville City Council meeting, and we are at item number 11. Item 11 is the ratification of the resolution that the Economic Development Authority just acted on. And members of the council, this is the ratification of the City Council of the action of the EDA. May I have a motion, please?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilmember Keeley makes a motion, second by Councilmember Sherry. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries. Thank you very much, Ms. Stray.
Thank you.
We now move on to item number 12. And item 12 this is a continued item from the last council meeting, and this is to approve an ordinance amending Title 10, Chapter 12 and 14 of the Burnsville City Code regarding the residential metal roofs. Mr. Slania, our planner, is presenting this evening. Mr. Slania.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. The City Council saw this at their last meeting on August 20th, at which time the Council discussed ordinance amendment, and at that time directed staff to come back with two amendments, two alternatives. One that would allow standing seam metal roofs for single and two family, and one that would prohibit standing seam. The language requested is in your packet. Just a brief history: the Planning Commission discussed this at a meeting in July and August of 2013. I do have some additional images. Oops, I am on the wrong PowerPoint. I have some additional images that were not available at the last meeting for the council. Specifically, homes in Burnsville that do have metal roofs. This was seen at the last meeting. This is a standing seam metal. This is also another home in town with standing seam. You can see the glare from the sun. Same home. This is a different property, slightly darker color used on the standing seam. In comparison, these are metal shingles used on a multifamily complex in town. Obviously, a quick glance from the car, you would not notice much of a difference from asphalt to metal. And this is a neighboring community that allows metal roofs. Council, I have additional images should you choose to go through them, or if you have any questions for staff. The language is available for reference.
Mr. Slania, the standing seam, how many properties do we have now with standing seams? And now we're making thinking about a change in
Madam
whether
Mayor,
allowing it or not allowing it.
Madam Mayor, staff doesn't have an accurate count on that. Certainly less than 10% of our properties have that. As metal has become more popular recently, it is growing currently, but years ago we didn't have a lot of metal roofs. They're now becoming more popular.
Councilmember Sherry.
I did see that staff had expressed concern over only the standing seam, not the metal and would you tell the difference why?
Certainly. Madam Mayor, Council, in staff's review of this and looking at some of these images, there was a concern that the standing seam provides more of an industrial or commercial feel. Obviously, the ordinance amendment addresses single and two-family units, so single and two-family neighborhoods and single-family home neighborhoods. Staff's concern was that these may be out of place or give too much of a commercial feel to the neighborhood. On the other hand, the Planning Commission discussed this multiple times also and have a differing opinion, which is why staff is back to the council with the two alternatives.
Okay. Councilmember Keeley.
What was the Planning Commission vote on that? Was that 4-1 or 5-0? It was pretty strong, I think, in favor.
I believe it was unanimous, 5-0.
5-0 in favor of standing seam.
Well, yeah, in favor of going to the metal shakes, shingles, slate, and the standing seam.
But no galvanized or raw unfinished metal, correct?
That is correct.
One of the things that we discussed at the last meeting, and I thought it was a great idea by Councilmember Coughlin to defer this to this meeting, so we had Madam Mayor present, thought about this and talked to a few people. I actually passed a few houses driving south over the holiday weekend and noticed these metal roof standing seams seems to be fairly popular. And my guess is they're all expensive, about 2 to 3 times the cost of asphalt, but that standing seam compared to some of these others might be similar. It almost looks like to me it might be the lower end of the cost for a metal roof versus those metal shingles, for instance. They look that comes off very, very expensive looking. But the one thing I really note about it is I don't know how they hold up in hailstorms, if they dent or if they're thick enough to withstand hail. But I got to believe that there's some motivation for people to go to this. One clearly is, did I hear somebody shake their head? Oh, or see. Clearly is they last far longer, which means they're more sustainable, less asphalt shingles going into landfills. They're very, very expensive, and I'm glad actually people are turning to them because that may be what's motivating them. Much more expensive, but they last for decades compared to a 15 to 20 year max for an asphalt roof. And I also noted that they handle snow far better than asphalt shingle roofs, which can have snow or ice buildup damage. And these pictures, for instance, the one in front of us, this picture, I'm guessing with that pitch of a roof, nothing sticks and the snow just slides off down its sled. And so no damage from ice issues. I don't know about the hail question, but I'm guessing that they handle hail much better, so they don't have to be replaced as often in hailstorms, which we have that up here. I voiced at the prior meeting that I was in support of I agree, in my opinion, with the Planning Commission. I don't see an aesthetic disadvantage to the raised seam. It is clearly different than the steel shingle or a couple of those other styles. But I am in agreement that raw metal or galvanized absolutely does not look right because it looks very industrial. Because all these standing seams are colors like browns and greens and whatnot, I think they're fine. And based on their expense, their sustainability, how they handle snow, repel damage and have to be replaced, I'd certainly like to see us allow people to do it if they were to choose to do it. So I'm in support, and I agree with the Planning Commission's position. I don't see any significant aesthetic downside to what the Planning Commission decided on, 5-0.
Councilmember Sherry.
Well, I agree with you on the quality of a metal roof, but I do disagree about the aesthetic impact, even just for the two homes we have pictured here. I live in a neighborhood, a very short street with all the houses have very steeply pitched roofs. And honestly, if all those 11 houses had standing seam roofs, it would look like a strip mall. It would look like a strip mall. It'd be very, very, very commercial looking. I think that the expense of this should not be our consideration. And I think that if you want to talk environment, these roofs can be, even if they're painted, they're still very reflective. If we want to be concerned about the heat island of our community, these reflect heat. They absorb nothing. But my main concern is the compatibility with the existing shingle look that we have or textured look that we have in our single-family homes and multi-family homes now too. I think it would be a mistake to just let this ride. I think that while the Planning Commission looked at that, and I watched their meeting, both meetings where they discussed it, I don't think they really spent a lot of time dwelling on the aesthetics of it. And I do think that we spend a lot of time and concern about visual standards in this community, and I think this is one where I just think it'd be better to stick with the traditional. Some of our developments have covenants, and they would not allow these. No way, no how. So I don't understand why those developments should. I would think that if we allowed standing seam roofs, then we should insist that the developments that have covenants also allow them.
Anyone else? You know, I watched the meeting, and I also looked at this, and if you can just go back to the shingles, and when you look at the shingles, they look aesthetically pleasing from a visual appeal. And when I look at things, I'm thinking long-term impact to the community, not just today, but 10, 15, 20 years. And Councilmember Keeley, I understand and I agree with you that the standing standing seam probably is. Yeah, I don't know what the cost of these things are, and so I agree with Councilmember Sherry that shouldn't play a factor into what we're looking at in terms of materials that is allowed in the community. And I've looked when I was in Europe at some of the solar panels when they have homes that are grid complete. It's mostly all with shingles because they're very small and so their electricity and their solar is captured by that, and then it goes through the whole house, and it's a grid complete. So I'm thinking of that as well. And Councilmember Sherry, you mentioned about heat islands. I wonder what that does to our footprint, now sustainability. Ms. Faulkner, did you folks look at that? Because I see Mr. Schultz. Yes, Mr. Slania.
Madam Mayor, Council, that is not something we reviewed as part of this. We understand from a manufacturing, from a single-family ownership standpoint, metal roof, regardless of the design, is going to be more efficient. I couldn't say on the spectrum of all the different designs of metal roof what is most or least efficient, or the heat island.
Because it deflects the heat. So
yeah, and the tiles don't. They sort of absorb it more. Ms. Faulkner.
Our natural resources director just advised me there's a lot of factors that would go into how it would play into our greenhouse gases and our sustainability plan, the insulating factors, the color, the thickness, all kinds of other factors I think that we certainly did not study as part of this, but we could look at that if that's something that you wanted us to look into.
Well, because if we have a sustainability plan, then everything should be in alignment. If we're going to adopt something in one area, it should be supportive of a plan that says we're going to be reducing our carbon footprint, and we're not going to be promoting heat islands throughout the city, because that would be in conflict with one plan to the other. So, okay, Councilmember Coughlin.
I just still agree as with Councilman Keeley as I did during our last meeting, and I just want to go on the record for that I support what the commission did in full. So, and just looking at my iPad, just for the sake of conversation, I see that the consensus is that minimally it's a third more the cost, but your insurance costs go down dramatically, and the usual minimum warranty you get on a minimum metal roofs 50 years, but a number of them now are 75 years, and a number are lifetime warranty of the house as well.
But that's just for metal roof. We're not talking about the
but it's all metal. It's like the tiles are metal.
We're talking about the aesthetic, whether it be standing seam. So metal is metal. But we're talking about the aesthetic part of standing seam versus, I don't think anybody would argue about the durability and the length. I wouldn't, certainly not, but it's just the aesthetic part.
Councilmember Keeley.
I just wanted to make sure that we understood what the roofing efficiency from an energy standpoint was. Yeah. It deflects the heat, therefore you don't run your air conditioner nearly as much because your attic isn't nearly as hot, which is reducing that carbon footprint. In other words, we're reducing energy costs by putting a metal roof on because it's not absorbing the heat, thus heating the attic, thus heating the house, thus making the air conditioner work longer. Okay. You don't get the benefit in the wintertime with some sun absorbing the heat.
Councilmember Sherry.
Well, I just want to clarify what I meant about heat island. I mean, asphalt. I'm talking about heat island in terms of a metropolitan area. So asphalt, for example, reflects the sun. So that creates a heat island. It's always warmer in the city than it is out in the country. So a metal roof that reflects heat would add to that heat island. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
Not carbon necessarily.
No, but the heat island
Yeah,
has
the
a
heat island.
direct correlation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's mostly reflective.
Yeah. Yeah. But it is about the reflective.
Yeah, you can get that from looking at the
Yeah.
radars.
Yeah.
The NOAA radar has.
Okay.
Every major city has got a.
Yeah. Councilmember Nguyen.
I hear everyone's concerns, and I was looking back just at our last agenda background, and almost all of our surrounding cities approved metal roofs. And yet, we haven't seen all of a sudden neighborhoods going up and 20 houses having metal roofs. I'm just wondering, how much of a concern is it? If we say, yes, you can put a metal roof on, is everyone going to come? I guess to the aesthetic, you know, would everyone on your street really get a metal roof?
The standing seam.
the
Because I
standing
think
seam.
they will go to the metal with the tile and so forth. Mr. Slaney, I'm going to go to Councilmember Sherry.
Well, it seems to me that only one community actually spelled out standing seam. Is that correct?
Correct, Madam Mayor, Council, if I may. The communities we inventoried, they were all supportive of using metal as a substantial material, as is staff in the Planning Commission. To Councilmember Sherry's point, there was one community that was specific to say we want this metal in a shingle or tile design, not standing seam, and I think that's where the council was hung up last time on the votes of what was that specific design.
Yes.
I think it's safe to say metal will become more popular as time goes on.
Yeah,
Councilmember Sherry?
Yeah, and I understand that, because certainly, as our councilman members have pointed out, there are definite benefits for the length of the durability and the fire protection and so forth to using metal. But as I said at our last discussion of this, I'm reluctant to be a trendsetter, so to speak. I mean, because not enough communities have really wrestled with this yet. Because the standing seam design for other than industrial or commercial use, which is where we see it all the time now, to have it applied in residential use is a relatively new thing. So I would like to put it in our ordinance that we do not allow it, and let's revisit it in a couple of years, if my colleagues would agree, to see if other communities are saying, hey, we don't care.
And Councilmember Sherry, I've thought about this, and we have been conservative in the way that we address these things, and I'm tending to go on the conservative route and say that we approve the metal that has to do with shakes and shingles, slate and tile, but not the standing seam, and monitor it for a while and see how that is, because I want to go on a conservative side and revisit it, probably not in a year, but in 2 years, because that'll give us time to see how many others. But the others who now have it, they have to be grandfathered in.
Oh, yeah.
That is correct, Madam
They
Mayor.
have to be grandfathered in. So, but I'm leaning to be very much on a conservative side. I like the metal stuff because I see that throughout the country, and I see how. What I would like to ask staff: did you also consider solar tiles? Because I know it's not really prevalent in our country. It's a little bit more. But boy, I've seen them in Europe, the solar tiles.
Madam Mayor, Council, we did not review solar tiles specifically. We did look at solar panels and accommodating these roofs for solar panel systems, which, again, regardless of the design, metal roofs can be done, and they are easy to accommodate. We did not look into solar tiles specifically.
Okay. But I think we should take a look at that, because I think it'll be a product that might be coming into our country, and more others are looking at it. So I know there was a split council on this. I'm going to go with the very conservative side of things and look at to approve the shingles, the metal shingles and shakes and tiles, and not the standing seam. But I would say that the others would be grandfathered in, and then I'd like to revisit it if the council so in a year or two. Councilmember Keeley.
Two things. Number one, well, I'm not going to vote yes unless there's a provision for Southwest Burnsville to allow it, or lots that are greater than 2 acres or something like that. And number two, that if an application comes forth in a residential area, that we open the door for them to come before us to review it. I mean, if we can put those provisions in, then I'm okay with it.
Councilmember Sherry.
I can live with that, the first provision.
Southwest Burnsville.
Yeah.
Because
for
that's
large lots, because
lots and people don't see it. I can see
well,
that.
and some of those people have buildings for their horses, or they have outbuildings, farm-type outbuildings out there.
They do.
So I think that's actually rather
I'm okay
appropriate
with that
out there.
With Southwest Burnsville.
Yeah, I am
because
too.
That's a little.
I am too.
And is there any way we can, I mean,
Madam Mayor.
Yeah.
Go ahead, sorry.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
I'm going to go to Ms. Johnston. Did you want to comment on?
Just on Councilmember Keeley's second point, I mean, someone can always come before the council with a conditional use permit. So
That's right.
they could certainly do that through our normal processes now.
Would they, Ms. Johnson, would they know to do that?
Our staff
if
can
our
help them to do that.
When they apply.
ordinance says no standing seam, and they go, well, we wanted to replace our roof after hail damage with standing seam. Well, it's not allowed, so then they don't even come before us.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Keeley, we have a myriad of applicants for conditional use permits every single year.
As long as
So,
the applicant knows that they have that option.
Yes.
There would be a variance. Actually, Jennifer Faulkner could please clarify as well.
Yeah.
I would add
Ms. Faulkner, because I think it is a variance too.
So if you wanted to come back to you, the council, I would suggest that we make it a conditional use permit, that standing seam metal roofs in residential areas in R1 and R2 are conditional use, and that they're permitted outright in R1A.
Yeah.
Then it would come back before.
R1A is Southwest Burnsville.
That's right.
Correct.
That's because they're
I'm not
much
comfortable with that.
for what, the conditional use?
I'm not. I mean, I just
Well,
think it's
but they-
like saying, well, it's not, it's against the rule, but maybe not.
But we have that provision right now for everything.
I'd rather not put it in the ordinance, or in the code.
But Ms. Faulkner.
Then the only other option is, as I think Heather was getting to, any citizen can come and speak to you before a council meeting, and if they really want a metal roof, certainly we can tell them
Well,
to do that.
no, a standing seam,
Thank
please.
you,
Yeah.
a standing seam roof. Then they can come and make that request, and then you could direct us to change the ordinance at that time.
What you're saying, Councilmember Sherry, is you don't want it in the ordinance that they can have a conditional use. You want them to go through the other process that says, if you really want to have a standing seam, then you can go. There is a process for that is called the conditional use process.
I think, given what you had said earlier about taking the conservative approach, I think that fits a little more neatly with that spirit of taking the conservative approach. But to do it, to not make it a conditional use in the ordinance. But I certainly do agree that we can do it in Southwest Burnsville, because those lots are large.
Larger. They're 2 acres.
Yeah.
Or more.
I would stay with my original suggestion. I think based on the fact that only one other community is isolated, single, or raised seam,
Today.
and the rest of them accept it
Today.
And I think they probably, I mean, I agree, it's a new thing, but they've been around quite a while. More people are turning to them for the exact reasons that we want them to turn to metal roofs. They're 40% more energy efficient. They last 3 times longer than a regular roof.
Metal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Absolutely. Metal, but not standing seam.
And the standing seam is in that, and standing seam is one of the most popular of them, because that's
Because
the
it's
one that we
cheap,
see the
and it
most.
looks like it.
But, and I respect your opinion, we
Okay.
differ on that. So I would like to make a motion that we,
Okay. You're making a motion?
I gotta try and rephrase it the way Ms. Faulkner did. That we amend our ordinance that R1A metal roofs are allowed with the, as outlined by the Planning Commission, which would include raised seam, and that it's a CUP in R1 and 2.
Second.
Could we restate that, how that would read in the
Ms.
code?
Faulkner, do you, and,
I believe your motion was, Councilmember Keeley, to amend the ordinance to allow standing seam metal roofs, along with the shakes and the shingles, in R1A, and to, what you said was to allow it as a conditional use permit. I think what you meant was to allow standing seam metal roofs as a conditional use permit.
Yes.
R1.
In R1 and R2.
R1 and R2, and then allowed in
R1A.
R1A.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And so the ayes have it. And so we will have allowed in 1, 2, with a conditional use for the standing seam, and then allow standing seams allowed in R1A.
And shake, shingles, and tiles
Tiles
are allowed.
allowed.
All districts. Permitted.
Yes.
Permitted.
Okay. There are no other items to come before us this evening, and a motion to adjourn is in order.
So move.
Second.
Councilmember Sherry makes the motion, second by Councilmember Keeley. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, say nay, and the motion carries.